Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode in this KC series where we're going to talk about skills today. This is the episode a lot of people have probably been waiting to watch, and it's probably going to end up being a multi-part series because there are just so many skills in this game and it would just take forever to cover everything. But let's jump in and get started. You might want to use the spreadsheet link at the bottom of the video. It's a little bit outdated. I'll try to put a link to a new one that my friend is updating. But there are a lot of skills in this game, and it would be useful to follow along with what we're talking about. I think the best way to approach this is let's just go through a bunch of different units or different monsters and see what skills they have and just talk about them as they come up. So the first skill we're going to talk about is, this is important to talk about. In the previous video, I said that there's passive skills and active skills. When it's a monster's turn, like let's say it's this guy's turn right now, he is going to try to do an active skill, and if he can't do his active skill, he's going to have a 100% chance of doing his normal skill, a normal attack. All right. Now, a normal attack or an active skill obviously has a percentage chance associated with it. And before I go further, I wanted to mention something about multiple active skills on one monster. This is a mistake a lot of people make. So we want to correct it before any of you guys make it. This is my friend's unit. He's trying to sell it, and he did something that was kind of a mistake here. It was an accidental mistake, though. He has this skill, Lemmy Giton. I don't even know how to say it. I never say it out loud. But at level 3, Lemmy has a 26% chance of proccing. Now, this is an active skill. So, obviously, when it's the Gap's turn, he's going to have a 26% chance of doing this active skill, and if it does not proc, he'll do a normal attack. However, my friend had put on another active skill on this unit. So you can have multiple active skills on one monster. So the second active skill he put on was Diamond Dust, and this has a 17% chance of proccing at level 1. Now here's the problem. You'd think, okay, well when it's the Gap's turn, he has a 26% chance of this proccing, and he has a 17% chance of this proccing. No, that's not how it works. When you have multiple active skills on a monster at a time, what actually happens is if the first skill is 26% and the second skill is 17%, the second skill is actually based on this 26%. So what I mean by that is if the 26% chance fails, so the Lemmy skill does not proc, then the percentage chance that Diamond does proccing is a factor of the 26%. So 0.26 times 17 is 4.42. So the Lemmy or the Diamond Dust skill actually has a 4.42% chance of proccing because it's the second active skill. All right. Now let's say that there was a third active skill on that Gap unit. That percentage would be even less. So the moral of the story is you really only want one active skill on a monster at a time, because the second and third active skills you put on are, the percentage of them occurring will be so much less. And so unfortunately this unit was kind of built wrong. Diamond Dust was a fantastic skill, but it was just unfortunately put on the wrong monster. So when you build your units, make sure everybody has a maximum of one active skill. They don't need any active skills, but if you are going to use one per monster. So let's talk about the OSM. The OSM is a really great card. It's a super rare. So we'll kind of talk about monsters and skills in this series. So this is an OSM. It teaches Onslaught, and Onslaught is not learnable. It's not teachable by any skills or by any cards aside from holiday cards. Sometimes Sega has these holiday cards which are 0.5 cost cards, and they'll teach one of 3 skills, and usually Onslaught is the 10% chance to learn skill, and it's extremely rare, extremely hard to get. And also there's a raid monster that teaches this too at level 7. So this can be acquired, but it's really, really rare. What this Onslaught does is it says when using normal attacks all enemies in range. Skill range depends on monster. I've leveled it to 10, so chance of occurring 70%. And the skill range, it's 2 because again it depends on the monster. So this attacks, when using a normal attack, if this procs, it attacks all enemies in range. Now let me show you a corresponding skill called Grand Slam. And I'll explain what both of these do in a second. So this is Grand Slam. It's also a passive skill. It says when using normal attack, randomly attacks an enemy, so one enemy, in range 2 to 4 times. Skill range depends on monster, chance of occurring 70%. Now his range is 3. So let's talk about both of these skills and what exactly they do. I'll try not to write sideways. So we have leader, rear, front versus front, rear, leader. Now we're going to assume that down here this is an OSM and up here it's a CHK. So it's 2 examples in one. Alright, now the OSM has a range of 2, remember. And the CHK has a range of 3. The onslaught skill, what that does, alright, now this video is about skills, not necessarily monsters. So we're just going to show you 2 examples of where we had onslaught on this guy, and let's pretend we had onslaught on this guy. Alright, so onslaught on him, because he's a range of 2, onslaught's going to allow us, using a normal attack, to hit everybody in range. So this has a range of 2. So if onslaught procs, it's going to hit the front, plus it's going to hit the rear. A normal attack would just allow us to hit one of these people. But if onslaught procs, it's going to hit everybody in range. And his range is 2, so he's going to hit front and rear. Alright, so if you put the OSM in the back, 1, 2, he couldn't hit any of the enemies, because he'd be out of range. So unless you have something like burst range, if you increase his range, he can hit the leader. So that's why, let's look at the CHK. If we have onslaught on him, remember onslaught hits everybody in range, it's going to hit 1, 2, and 3. So it's going to hit all these guys one time. That's what onslaught does. Now let's look at Grand Slam. Alright, Grand Slam lets us hit the skill description is kind of wrong. It says an enemy 2 to 4 times, but sometimes it can hit multiple enemies. But the maximum amount of hits you're going to get out of one proc of Grand Slam is 4. Alright? So basically, if Grand Slam procs on the CHK, it's going to hit... how do I diagram this? It's going to hit any of these guys, alright, up to a total of 4 times. Right, so it could hit the leader twice and the rear twice. Or it could hit the front once, the rear once, and the leader twice. Usually what happens is it will just go down the order and hit front, rear, and then leader as it kills them off. With the OSM, if it has Grand Slam, it's going to be range limited again, so it's going to only hit the front and the rear a total of 2 to 4 times. This is 2 to 4. Alright? So onslaught hits everybody in range. OSM has a range of 2, so it's going to hit the front and the rear. The CHK has a range of 3, so onslaught would hit everybody. Grand Slam hits anybody in range a total combined 2 to 4 times. Alright? So what a lot of people do to make a really ultimate monster is they'll combine both of them. So check this out. You can combine passive skills. So people will take onslaught and they'll add Grand Slam. So how does that work? Previously, before you could learn onslaught, you would add Grand Slam to your OSM. But now, because you can learn onslaught, although it's very, very hard to do, people will add Grand Slam. People will add onslaught to their CHK. Here's what happens. Leader, rear, front, rear, leader. Again, down here we're going to assume OSM, CHK. And because this is a range of 2 and this is a range of 3. So we're going to assume that both of these monsters have onslaught and Grand Slam on them. Onslaught and Grand Slam. What that's going to do is, if both of them proc, alright, so that both at level 10 have a 70% chance of proccing, alright, is the OSM would hit everybody in range, and hit everybody in range 2 to 4 times. So Onslaught would proc, it would hit this guy, and Grand Slam would proc, and it would hit this guy 2 to 4 times. And also because this guy's in range, if Onslaught procced, it hit him, and it would hit him 2 to 4 times. So theoretically, you can get 8 hits out of a normal attack if both Onslaught and Grand Slam proc. Now, the CHK has a range of 3. So if you have Onslaught and Grand Slam on them, hit this guy, and hit this guy, and this can be hit 2 to 4 times. Oops, 2 to 4 times, 2 to 4 times. So theoretically, you can get 12 hits out of a range 3 CHK. So this is really an ultimate skill that a lot of people put on, and it's really fantastic. Now, with these normal attacks, people will also, oftentimes these multi-hit skills, people will put something called lava hands on. Now remember, lava hands, and there's poison imbues, and there's terror imbues, and there's also poison, terror, and stun imbues. And if you put those on, what will happen is they'll give you a chance of doing something during your normal attack. In this case, this is a lava hand skill, and it says, and this is, there's no percentage associated with it. So 100% of the time, this thing's going to work. And what this does is, during a normal attack is going to pierce the guard effect and damage the enemy. And also, it acts as an aura. See, attack also increases depending on skill level. So this is your 1.8 plus 0.12 times your level of lava hand. So this can actually increase your attack damage. But what we're really looking at is the normal attack pierces guard. There are guard and barrier skills in this game. A barrier skill would be created by something like Mirage Shift and Mirage and other stuff like that. And what that will do is that will protect all of your enemies from all of your allies from one hit. So let's see how that plays out. I want to look for an example, but it might be hard to find. Maybe I can find one. Let me see here. So we're talking about the difference between guard and barrier right now, and how that can apply to Onslaught and Grand Slam. Gotta find something here. Okay, this might work. Alright, so there's my Mirage Shift, and that cast a barrier on my team. So when the enemy hits me, my barrier will nullify the attack, but it will break my barrier, but I sustain 0 damage. So your barrier protects you from one hit. So in a Grand Slam attack, if I was being attacked by Grand Slam, and let's say that the dice roll of the Grand Slam decided to hit me 3 times. Alright? The first time, my Mirage Shift, or my barrier, would protect me from the first hit. But then the second hit and the third hit would go through and do damage to me, because it would break my barrier. Now there's something else, and that's called guard. See if I have an example of that. I might not. This is the different kind of guard, but we'll still show you what the deal is. Alright, so here's a guard. And the way you get guard is you use something called an ASP, and you have enough monster count, or the way everybody else does it is you use something called Gale Armor. And the two skills, this ASP unit and its base skill, and the Gale Armor guard skill, are a little bit different, but the end result's the same. What a guard does is it protects you for a certain number of turns against any and all attacks. All right. So this guy right here, this is just an NPC enemy, and it tried to attack me, but my guard prevented the damage. And if the guard skill works, all right, you're only going to take 1 damage. All right. So down here, my guard protected me again. My guard protected me again. So a guard skill is in some ways better than a barrier skill because it's going to protect you from many attacks. But remember when we were looking at the OSM, I said a lot of people that use Grand Slam and Onslaught will include a skill called Lava Hands, because what Lava Hands does is it pierces the guard. Now it doesn't break the guard, it just pierces it. So what that means is, let's say the Steam Shooter had Lava Hands, alright? He would pierce my guard and do damage to me, alright? But it wouldn't break my guard. So if another NPC tried to attack me, and that other NPC did not have Lava Hands, he would not break my guard. The only thing that can quote-unquote break your guard and completely remove it from you is if you get stunned, or if there is a buff removal skill, like on the Gap. But the moral of the story is a lot of people will include Grand Slam and Lava Hands with, they'll include Lava Hands with Grand Slam and Onslaught because a lot of people use guard from, and you teach it from a super rare Sylph, but a lot of people will use that, and if you don't have a guard, piercer on your team, on your Grand Slam Lava or Grand Slam Onslaught unit, you're not going to break the guard, and you're just going to keep doing 1 damage to them, not enough damage. And let's kind of switch gears just for a second and get off topic and talk about one more difference between barrier and guard. You might think, well, hey, guard's pretty cool because it protects you for a certain number of turns from all damage, right? Whereas a barrier only protects you from 1 hit. Well, the difference between a barrier and guard, though, aside from how many hits it lasts, is that a barrier is not based on monster count of you, but a guard is. And what that means is Sega implemented a rule, because back in the day, a lot of people would have a team, a front rear leader, and they'd have 10 monster counts on each, all right? And they'd have Gale Armor somewhere, like a guard skill. And they would just go out and they'd fight, an enemy with, 100,000 monster count, and they'd beat them because the NPC enemy didn't have Lava Hands and couldn't break the guard. And Sega said, well, you know what, too many people are doing this, it's ruining the game, and so we're going to implement a rule. And the rule basically says that if you have guard and the enemy attacks you, you're going to take more than 1 monster count damage if the enemy has more monster count than you. So let's say you have 10 monster count, alright, and let's just do leader, rear, front versus front, rear, leader. Alright, so we're talking about guard right now, and one of the downsides to guard versus barrier. Let's say everybody on my team has 10 monster count, and everybody on the enemy team has 1,000 monster count. Alright? But I have guard. So what happens when this guy hits my guy? A rule is going to go into effect and say, because the enemy front has more monster count than my front, alright, I'm going to take more than 1 damage, and that the amount of damage I take is going to be 10% of the difference. So this guy has 1,000 minus 10 monster count equals 990 monster count. Alright? That's the difference. 990 monster count. 10% of that is 99 monster count. So I'm going to take 99 monster count damage on 1 hit, even though I have a guard up. And so basically I'm going to die. Now if I had 1,000 monster count and he had 1,000 monster count, I'd only suffer 1 damage. Because there's no difference in monster count between us. 1,000 minus 1,000 would be 0, and so I'd take 0 additional damage. So as the difference between my monster count and the person attacking me's monster count increases, so too will the damage. But remember, barrier is different. So if I have a barrier up, alright, even if I have 10 monster count and he has 1,000, for the first hit, I'm not going to take any damage. So that's really important, depending on what you're trying to build. A lot of people can use these low monster counts in echo units to do a lot of damage and survive, you know, 1 or 2 hits. But they can't do that with a guard. They'd only do that with a barrier. So back to our OSM. All right. So a lot of people will use, you know, a very high-end, high-tier build is using your OSM because it has Onslaught as a base skill, or using a CHK, and with either of those they'll always put on Lava Hands. Now some people that use an OSM, they want to get the 3 hits out of it, because right now the range is 2 on an OSM, and so they'll put burst range on, and that will give them an additional 1 range, so they'll have a range of 3, and they'll also put Lava Hands on, and that way the OSM can hit everybody in range. Sometimes what people will do with the CHK right here is they'll just use Grand Slam and they'll just put on Lava Hands, and that's it. So there's a bunch of different things you can do, but just remember, Lava Hands is going to pierce guard. Grand Slam is going to hit 2 to 4 times if it procs based on a normal attack. Onslaught will hit everybody in range, and that range is dependent on the monster range, and you can combine them. Now let's go back to our OSM. And eventually I will talk about normal monsters too. Right now we're just looking at super rares, which can be difficult for some people to acquire. So we will eventually talk about normal skills too, but we're just kind of going down the list and looking at what's available. So we have Onslaught, you know, it's going to hit everybody in range, so range of 2, it's going to hit front and rear. Grand Slam, so now it's going to hit front and rear 2 to 4 times each, alright? And now it's going to pierce the guard. It's not going to break the guard, alright? It's just going to pierce the guard. But that will let us do full damage. Now, somebody might have, like I said, somebody might have a barrier on and Gale Armor on. So that first hit, when I hit them, alright, it's going to break the barrier, alright? They're not going to get any damage done. But Grand Slam plus the combination of Onslaught is going to proc again, and it's going to do damage. Alright, we jump to the arena so I can talk to you, I can show you an example of Grand Slam and Onslaught proccing together. I battled this unit. Now I'm going to go down here to... now let me show you something. So I have Gale Armor. I have a guard skill on my team. Alright. And... now they did a normal attack on me. The guard blocked 4 damage. And realize, I mentioned this before, but it might have gotten lost on some of you. The amount of damage for a normal attack, alright, is based on monster count. It's essentially 1.1 times your monster count, give or take. So in the minimum damage, if you have 1 monster count that you can give to somebody, is about 5. So for a normal attack, this werewolf lady had only 1 monster count, so it's not, I mean, she's not going to be doing a lot of damage to begin with. But remember, this is what guard does. I have 9,900, I had 9,999, so clearly I had more monster count than the werewolf lady did, and so I'm not going to suffer that 10% damage penalty, and my guard is going to block all of it because she doesn't have Lava Hands on herself, obviously. So when you see Onslaught proc, it's going to say Orc Swordmaster's range attack. Right? If nothing procs and it's just a normal attack, it says Werewolf Lady's attack. Right? She just did a normal attack. Now I did a normal attack, but my Onslaught procced. And then if you see Grand Slam proc, it's going to say Orc Swordmaster's continuous attack. Realize that if you have both of these on one monster, you know, only one of them might proc at a time. You know, the goal is to level both of them up so they'll both proc together. But remember, my OSM has a range of 2. So the front and the back, the back means the rear, the front and the back were hit, alright, and you only see them hit once because 1 hit killed them, alright. I could try to find an example where I'm hitting somebody multiple times, but it, you know, might take some time to find. The moral of the story is, though, if I didn't kill, like this guy for instance, I would keep hitting him until I did. Now this Gigas attacked me, and my guard blocked 12,000. damage. So if I didn't have Gale Armor on my OSM would have died. So that's how valuable a guard is. And also realize that if I didn't have guard and I just had barrier, this werewolf lady's attack would have broken my barrier, and then I'd be exposed. Alright? So down here, when this guy would have attacked me, I would have died because my barrier would have been gone. I mean, we're assuming no guard. So, you know, in one turn, you know, in turn one, this is all within one turn. You know, your guy in the front, which is my OSM here, can be hit multiple times, and so a barrier might not be enough. You know, they say a good offense is better than a stronger defense. You know, you want to be the first to attack. You want to be the first to get out there, because then you're just going to reduce the amount of times that he can hit you, and the amount of, you know, he might have some really cool skills on there that could really wipe you out if you don't get to him first. So it's important to be faster, you know, have that first attack, and get it out there and do the damage. But you know, like I said, it's also important to realize if you just have a barrier up, you could die. So you know, guard is very important. But guard is expensive to get because you know, a super rare Sylph is going to run you. If you level it all the way to 7 to teach Gale Armor, that could cost you 30,000 DP. So it's a very expensive skill to level up and teach. So we've got a turn 2. Now this is the minimum damage we're talking about. My knight right here does not have a lot of attack. Now this Gigas unit has a very high defense. So I did an attack, and this is what minimum damage looks like. If I have maximum monster count, alright, like 9,999, the minimum damage I'm going to do is 300 if my attack cannot break his defense. You know, I need my attack to be significantly higher than his defense in order to do above minimum. If it was above that threshold, I would do maximum damage to him and he would instantly die. But because I didn't, because my attack's below his defense, I can't do max damage. And this wouldn't be a big deal though if he didn't have full monster count. Remember, if he had 1 monster count, the damage penalty is going to come into effect. Alright? And the damage penalty, the 10% rule, is irrespective of guard. Remember? So, you know, if I have 10 monster count and he has 1,000 monster count and he attacks me, alright, my guard will suffer that 10% damage rule. But also the same applies for just a normal attack. If I have, let me show you. If I have 50,000 attack and 9999 monster count, alright, but actually it doesn't even matter about attack. Attack and defense don't really matter. If I have 999 monster, 1,000, you know, 10,000 monster count, and he has 1,000 monster count, alright, the difference between us, alright, is 9,000. And so if I attack him, alright, he is going to take a minimum of that 10% difference. So if the difference is 9,000, the 10% is 900. So that 300 that you saw could be a lot higher, could be all the way to 900 if he did not have enough monster count. But because he had enough monster count, he had, you know, basically max and I had max, basically, there was almost no difference between our 2 monster counts, and so he's not going to take anything more than minimum damage, which in this case would be 300. So as the turn went on, I finally attacked him and he died, and that was the end of the battle. I fought him earlier, but I didn't stat my units right. Let me see if I can show you something else. So this is a previous battle I had with him, and in this battle I didn't stat my units with enough attack. My OSM did not have enough attack here. He just had base attack, and because of that, the golem has a very high defense, and so I could not, alright, I could not kill him with 1 hit. So that's why you see 314. And as you can see, continuous attack, so that's Grand Slam. My onslaught did not proc here. And so these are my 2 hits. You know, I got 1, 2. Sometimes you get, you always get 2 to 4 hits. Sometimes you get 2, sometimes you get 3, sometimes you get 4. In this case, we only got 2 hits, and we didn't get more. Also because we didn't have onslaught proc. Let's see if we have another example. So this is a great example right here. So this is onslaught procking and Grand Slam procking, and my attack is very low, so I can't. They have very strong defense, so I can't break through their defense. But it shows you all the different hits. In this instance, it's hard to parse this, what's from Grand Slam and what's from Onslaught, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I hit him 6 times. So it looks like Grand Slam decided to proc for 3 hits. All right, and I get those 3 hits on each of those enemies. So here's my first hit, second hit, third hit. And I suffered poison field damage because his stone golem had something called poison field. Now that's a skill. Basically, when I attack him, if I don't kill him, I'm gonna have a chance of suffering poison damage. And so this poison effect hit me 3 times, 3 times, and it stacks. So when I go to hit him again, I should have suffered poison damage. Yeah, see there. There's myself suffering poison damage. Poison field. I guess I suffered the damage at the end of my turn for my monster. So I got hit a couple times with it, poison, and then finally it all stacked, and I took about 3,000 damage. So this is a very, a lot of people will build a defensive team and they'll have some kind of a poison skill on there, so that when you do get, paired against an onslaught or a Grand Slam, a multi-hit skill, I'm going to suffer a lot of damage. A lot of people will do that. So let's get out of here. Alright, so far we've talked about Onslaught, we've talked about Grand Slam, we've mentioned Guard and Barrier, we've talked about how Lava Hands can pierce a guard, and we've kind of rehashed the defense and attack importance, and also the minimum monster count, the 10% rule. See if we have some other cool stuff to talk about in here. Now, let's say you don't want Lava Hands. Let's say you want to do something else with your multi-attack skill. So here's my Grand Slam. Some people will teach Stun and Imbue. And what that does is it has a percentage chance of applying stun when using a normal attack. Alright, so every time I hit somebody, with Grand Slam 2 to 4 times, with Onslaught plus Grand Slam, everybody can be hit up to 4 times, so a total of 12 times total. Each one of those hits will have a 48% chance of stunning that enemy. Now a stun is going to break a guard. Alright, it will completely remove a guard. So if this guy attacks somebody else that has a guard on him, it will stun them, plus it will break their guard. And what basically, the stun will do is it will make them lose a turn. They won't be able to do anything that turn. As you level this stun and Imbue up, it will. It says skill range. That's a typo. It should just mean like proc percentage or whatever. But every hit have a 48% chance of stunning the enemy. If you level this to 10, it will hit 50. There's other things too. You can learn Poison Imbue, and it's just like Stun Imbue, but instead of stunning, you're going to poison the enemy. And now the difference we saw in the previous battle, Poison Field. Now a field skill is something that you put on like a high defensive monster, and when somebody attacks you, hopefully that field will proc and hurt them. So it's kind of like a defensive skill. But an Imbue is I'm going to have to go out there and do damage to them in order for the skill to proc. So that's why you want your imbues, like your Stun Imbue, your Poison Imbue, your Terror Imbue, on like a Grand Slam or an Onslaught monster, whereas you want your fields, like a Poison Field, Terror Field, and there's no Stun Field. I think there's something else. There's a Curse something similar to a curse field is called curse infection or curse infusion, but you want those on your defensive monsters. Let me see if we have a field in here I can show you. There we go. Now this is Terror Field. Applies Confuse effect to an enemy receiving an attack. Sega has a lot of these descriptions worded wrong. What this basically means is if somebody attacks this dragon, there's a 75% chance of applying Confuse to them. Confuse used to be a really great skill. What it would do is it would confuse the enemy, and a confused enemy could like attack their own team. So if the enemy front is confused, the next time the enemy front goes to attack, it might attack one of his own allies. And so it's a really great skill, but Sega's really nerfed it a lot, so now it rarely procs. I think there's like a 10% chance of a confused enemy actually attacking its own team. So it's really not worth anything anymore. It used to be a really great skill. The big skill now is from a debris mob, and I'll show you that. It's called Temptation, and Temptation teaches Charm, applies Charm effect to an enemy at the start of a turn. There's also another monster that applies Charm, the Goblin Princess. Now this skill applies Charm and also greatly boosts attack. At level 10, the percentage of this proccing is 30, and the percentage of Temptation proccing is about 95%. So this does the same thing essentially that the Lilith does, the previous monster I just showed you, but the percentage is a lot lower. And what Charm does, Charm's really cool. Let's go over here and find a log. I want to show you a pretty cool battle from yesterday. You guys will like this. Oops. Alright, check this out. This is my Charm team, and this is the final wave of the Breeze team, and look what happens. See what Charm does. Alright, so my Lilith cast Temptation. It went twice because I have a skill called First Lady, and now First Lady lets you basically take 2 turns. So if you have First Lady on your monster, instead of getting 1 attack during your turn, you're going to get 2. But the cost of that is it's going to make another of your allies wait, and the wait basically means that your monster waiting is going to skip their turn. So if First Lady procs, alright, it's going to basically take a turn away from this monster and give it to the monster with First Lady. And that will allow the skill on the First Lady monster the opportunity to proc twice. Now Temptation is a very high percentage proc skill, and so it proc twice here. Now if you look, Temptation charmed the Muspel. The Muspel was awaiting this Volcano spell. Volcano I can talk about in a second, but it's a skill that attacks just all of the enemies, and also it removes any guards, any barriers. It's really an ultimate skill, but it takes a while to kind of warm up. It takes a couple turns to warm up. But what happens to a charmed monster, though, is it will say, the charmed monster, it says, could not act normally due to charm. So it's like, uh-oh. And so instead of Volcano proccing on me, this guy casts Volcano on his own team. How cool is that? So it basically negates all of the buffs on his team, and then also does damage. It's pretty cool, huh? Charm's a devastating skill, but it's very hard to, you can't teach it. The only monsters that have it are this Lilith and also the Goblin Princess, but it really can be a devastating skill. So, you know, the charm skill, the terror skill, whether it's a field or an imbue, the poison, terror imbue, and also the stun imbue. There's also one more, and that's called Curse Infusion. Curse Infusion, what that does is it's kind of like a field. So when this guy's attacked, it's going to have a chance of proccing, and this is just a nasty skill. It says it activates when damage is taken and applies curse to all enemies. Now the curse amount, poison and curse, they're kind of similar. They're completely dependent on my monster count. All right, and at level 10, for instance, if curse procs on the enemy hits me and it gets cursed, the enemy is going to receive 25% damage based on my monster count. So if my monster count, all right, is 10,000, they're going to receive 2,500 damage. And this goes for a couple turns. I think it goes for 3 turns, or Curse Infusion. So if it procs once, all right, they're going to continually take damage for 3 turns. But what's cool is it applies to all of the enemies. Let me see if I can show you an example of this this happening. So this is another status effect. You know, status effects, we have curse, we have stun, we have charm, we have poison. Let's look at it happening here. Alright, so it's like a field. So when I'm attacked, the archer attacks me, I have a guard, I only suffer 1 damage, but it causes Curse Infusion to proc. Now see, it didn't proc here. The ghoul attacked me, and I didn't. You know, my guard protected me. I only suffered 1 damage, but Curse Infusion didn't proc. I can level this up to have a higher chance of it proccing, so it will proc everywhere. So it procs here, and now and it affects everybody. I mean, that's a really cool skill. A field will only affect the person doing the attack. So if this ASP had a field, you know, a poison field on him, and the archer attacked me, only the archer would be poisoned. But Curse Infusion is sick because it applies to all of the enemies. So when an enemy now that has curse is going to go in and do an attack, before he does his attack, he's going to be cursed. So this Lancer is about to attack, but right before his attack, the curse damage applies, and it reduces him about 2,000. So he's down to 2,800 monster count now. The ghoul, it only was reduced 448 monster count before its attack, but that's all he had, so he died. And the Goblin Archer was reduced about 2,000 also before the Goblin Archer's attack. The difference between a curse and a poison is a curse is going to apply the damage before the enemy attacks, so right as the enemy's attacking, before his attack happens, the curse is going to take effect. A poison, on the other hand, if an enemy's poisoned, the poison damage will apply at the end of their turn, or at the end of their attack. So right here, this archer attacked right before his attack, the curse damage applied. If instead this was poison, the poison damage would happen down here after his attack. It's a slight difference, but it can make a difference in the long run. But these are all examples of status effects. Now let's look at one of the new monsters that can actually remove or clear status effects. So this is one of the new cards that just came out recently, and her skill is Earth Blessing, and it's a startup skill. And what this does is this is going to apply a veil effect, all right, to all of my team, and basically prevent me from receiving status effects for a certain number of times. So if the enemy tries to curse me, or stun me, or poison me, or charm me, or whatever, as long as this procced, it's going to say it dampens the effect, but it essentially neutralizes the effect. So I can't be stunned, I can't be poisoned, I can't be charmed, I can't be silenced. Silence is another skill that that constitutes a status effect. I can't be any of these things if the veil applies. The thing about veil, though, is it only, no, it's not called veil. In the battle log, they use the word veil, but this only protects for a certain number. So it's like a resistance, you know, like if something's resistant, it's not necessarily proof. Your watch might be water resistant, but it's not waterproof. So eventually, if I get hit enough with enough status effects, like let's say I'm cursed first, and then I'm poisoned, and then I'm poisoned again, and then I'm cursed again, on the fourth hit, you know, the veil might wear off. So this veil only lasts a certain number of hits. So if you're going to use this this Earth Blessing skill, it's not teachable, it's not learnable, so you'd have to use this card right now. If you're going to use this skill, you're going to want to be able to kill the enemy very quickly. Otherwise, your veil will soon wear off. Now, Trick or Treat is another skill which is interesting, and it can prevent these status effects from happening or from taking effect. This is a passive skill. The other one was a startup, remember, so it would have to start up at the beginning. This is a passive skill, so it's theoretically always active, but there is a chance associated with it. What this does is it activates when receiving status effects. Restores status effects of all friendly monsters, also increases monster count. The description's wrong. It says restores status effects. What this means is if this monster gets cursed, for instance, Trick or Treat can proc, and what it will do is it will remove all of the status effects from my entire team, and it will increase my monster count by about 300 or so. Alright? So if this monster, like let's say my team, one of my team hit somebody that had Curse Infusion on them, alright? This, assuming Trick or Treat procced, alright, this would then remove all of the curse and also give me a little bit of a monster count boost. Let me see if I can go to Arena and show you what this does. Alright, this is a great example. This is another debris mob up here, and it has a skill that silences me. And what that means is it basically prevents me from casting any skills, any active skills. Silence is a very deadly skill. So we're going to battle that team. We're going to use my Trick or Treat team. Oh look, I won. I didn't take any damage. How cool is that? And I completely killed him. He's got to be ticked off. Alright. The Tatiana skill is called Summertime Nightmare. It's a really deadly skill. It decreases my defense, my speed, and also applies silence. And what that means is, so you basically want to silence, so we're kind of switching gears for a second. If you're going to use the silence skill, and it's also available on other, you know, it can be taught, but not Summertime Nightmare. The only way to teach silence as a startup skill is, you can't do it. The only way to use it is by getting a Tatiana. And you'd want her to be slow, alright, because remember, the slower you are, the sooner you'll cast at startup. The fast people will cast last at startup, and the slow people will cast first. So you want your Tatiana to be very slow, because she will prevent the rest of my team from having their startup skills go. Let me fight her with somebody else and show you what I mean. Pretty sure I'm going to lose this one. Yep. Alright, watch what happened. So Summertime Nightmare was cast, and she's the slowest, so she went first. She applied silence to my team. Now that means my dragon cannot cast his skill because he's silenced. Now my warlock can, because my warlock was not silenced. Whether or not I'm going to be silenced is completely dependent on the level of the Summertime Nightmare skill, so they must not have leveled it up all the way. But my dragon and my little frog over here cannot cast their skills. So silence is a very cool skill. You just want, for the Tatiana, her to be very slow so that she can cast first and silence me and prevent me. But not only does it prevent your startup skills, it also prevents, it's not a good example here because I died right away, but it also prevents active skills during the turns. But we're talking about Trick or Treat, and so what Trick or Treat does is it procced here. I was silenced, and as soon as I was silenced, it procced, and it negated my silence and also gave me a growth. So I have 9,999 plus an additional 300 monster count. So basically, as long as this procs, I cannot be silenced anymore. Now, the difference between a Veil, the Earth Blessing skill, and Trick or Treat is very important. In order for Trick or Treat to proc, the Trick or Treat monster must receive the status effect. Alright? So if my Bress is stunned, alright, or my Dwarf is stunned, but not my Jack-o'-lantern, Trick or Treat is not going to proc. Alright? The Jack-o'-lantern has to be has to receive the status effect in order for Trick or Treat to have a chance of proccing. Now Veil, on the other hand, is going to apply a Veil to each one of my monsters. Alright? And so you're assuming this was the Hulu or the Hawaiian girl, alright? Even if she was not, did not receive the status effect, and my Breast did, or my Dwarf did. Do you guys think I say breast when I say breast? It's actually breast. I'm not saying breast. When one of these guys receives the status effect, the Veil will protect them individually. So Veil, the Earth Blessing skill that applies the Veil effect is going to be a lot different than the Trick or Treat effect, but at the end of the day they'll both remove status effects. Another way to remove a status effect, let me get out of here, is using a resist. Now there's stun resists, there's poison resists, there's curse resists, there's all kinds of resists you can use. I'll show you a stun resist. Stun reflect, same thing. Continuously nullifies stun effect, and when this monster receives a stun effect, there is a chance to reflect chance. So at level 1, it has it basically makes my my Glossa stun proof. You can't stun him anymore. And as I level this up, it would increase the chance that if I am, if somebody does try to stun me, it's going to reflect the stun back on the monster that casts the stun. This is a good, these reflects are good skills to have, but the downside is it only protects against stun. So I can still be cursed, I can still be poisoned, I can still be silenced. There's a lot of things that can still hurt me. So, it might be beneficial for me to put like Trick or Treat on here, or like or use that Hawaiian girl for the Earth Blessing effect, so that I'm protected against other stuff like the curse, like the poison, and like the silence. Alright, so we've talked about your onslaught, we've talked about your Grand Slam, we've talked about your imbues, like your poison, your stun, your terror. There's also a silence imbue too. You can do a silence also. We've talked about your charms, and we mentioned First Lady. I'll show you that again. So this is First Lady right here. Increases the attack turn of itself at the start of the turn. If there's an ally, reduces the action turn of one friendly monster. So basically, if I send her out by herself, she will have 2 turns as long as First Lady procs. But if I have an ally, it will take away one of my allies' turns. First Lady is a pretty cool skill because as you level it up, the chance of proccing is extremely high, whereas other skills the chance is fairly low. But First Lady is very high, but unfortunately the only way to learn First Lady is through a holiday card. You can't just directly teach First Lady right now. Here's a Sylph. Sylph? Sylph, I guess. I'm saying Sylph. And it applies Gale Armor. This is the guard effect we talked about. And like all startups, it says 100% on here, but the chance of it actually sticking to one of your monsters will increase as you level this up. So in the hidden skill for the Sylph is going to be Gale Armor at level 7. So you level this all the way up to 7 from 3, and you'll be able to have your shot at teaching Gale Armor to another monster. An important note about Gale Armor also is, or about a guard effect, well, Gale Armor in particular, it doesn't really matter about other guard effects. Gale Armor needs, at a minimum, 60 intelligence to work at the time of the cast of Gale Armor. So if you put this on a monster without enough intelligence, the guard is not going to properly block all of the damage. In order to properly block all of the damage at startup, when Gale Armor is cast, the monster casting it needs 60 intelligence. Alright, and that the amount of intelligence needed increases as the cost of the card decreases. So for example, this Sylph is a 3.0 cost card. Alright, so at startup, when it casts Gale Armor, in order for Gale Armor eventually in the turns to block all of the damage and only suffer 1 damage, you're going to need, I think it's 50 or 60 intelligence. But if you put Gale Armor on a lower cost monster, I'll show you. You put Gale Armor on a 1.0 cost monster, alright, you're going to need a lot more intelligence. I think you need about 90 intelligence for this Gale Armor to properly work. And then we're not talking about sticking. You know, you have to level this up very high in order for Gale Armor to actually stick on each one of your allies. But for it to actually block the damage, you need the proper intelligence. And so a lot of people will put Gale Armor on a monster that immediately or previously teaches Mind Progress or something. So they'd have Mind Progress, then they'd have Gale Armor immediately thereafter. The reason being is, if somebody casts a Mind Disturb on me to reduce my intelligence, this will at least negate the Mind Disturb, or the Mind Trick, alright, and bring me back to base intelligence. You know, if I was disturbed, the progress would negate that. Right, and I'd be at least at base intelligence, and so I'd have at least 60 intelligence. I'd cast my Gale Armor, and it would properly block all of the damage, you know, assuming no lava hands or stuff like that. What else to talk about? What are the skills that are neat? Let's look at some non-super rare skills. So we've mentioned the disturbs before. You know, your assault disturb, it reduces the attack of an enemy, and remember the disturbs stack and the progresses stack every turn, whereas your tricks and your shifts don't stack. You're going to get a higher boost with them, but they don't stack. I don't know if I've ever shown you a spirit. I've definitely talked about spirits before. You know, here's your spirit, continuously and greatly increases defense for that monster. This is equivalent to an aura, and this is like a multi-aura. It does 2 things. It continuously increases. Now, it doesn't greatly increase. It just increases intelligence and speed. So you have vigilant resist and you have vigilant shift. All your vigilance are going to affect your intelligence or speed. And your resist, I don't know if I've talked about this before. There's vigilance resist, there's valiant resist, and there's also voracious resist now. And any of your resists, as you level them up, it's going to dampen the reduction amount of the corresponding boosted stats. So essentially, if you get your resist, now this is vigilant resist, I'll show you another one real quick. That was vigilant. This is valiant resist, continuously increases attack and defense. And then there's a voracious resist. For some reason I don't have him, I don't think. Voracious increases, it actually greatly increases attack and speed, I believe. As you level it up, though, it's going to prevent a disturb from affecting you. So, I'm trying to think the best way to explain this. Here's Gale Armor right here. I said before Gale Armor you want to have a mind progress, because if you go and you fight somebody, you want at startup to be at least at 60 int, and if you don't have a mind shift or mind progress, they could trick you and you'll be below your base intelligence, and your Gale Armor is not going to work right? Well, what the resist is going to do, if somebody casts Gale or a mind disturb or mind trick on me, this is going to dampen it. Let me see if I can battle somebody and show you. Alright, I found a battle log that shows an example of a resist. So my knight has the vigilance resist, and so it's going to dampen a reduction in speed. It's going to increase my speed and also intelligence, and it's also going to dampen a reduction to speed and intelligence. So as you level the skill up, so at level 1 or level 3 it's really not going to do much, but when you get it to level 10, it's going to basically block all of the effect on a disturb or a trick. So my knight resist dampened skill effect intelligence. There was a mind disturb, it dampened it by 212, so I only got my my intelligence reduced by 9. So this can be a very handy skill to use, because to explain this properly, if I want a boosted intelligence, alright, I basically need in this instance 2 mind progresses. Alright, I need a faster, or I need a first mind progress, alright, to negate his mind disturb, and then I need a faster mind progress to then boost me, to get me above my base stats. The first one is just going to negate this disturb, and the second one, if it's faster, is going to get me above my base stats. But with the resist, you can kind of do double duty. So not only am I going to have my stats boosted, I'm also going to dampen the effect. So I only got reduced by 9, and a resist is essentially an aura and an aura at level 10 would be a 3 times multiplier. So if my intelligence is, let's say, 500 at base, the aura is going to make my intelligence 1500. So I have a boosted intelligence, and I prevent the dampen. So this is essentially saving me a skill slot. So now I don't need 2 mind progresses, and it also makes me a lot faster. Now it makes my knight a lot faster. Now the downside is, of course, the boost only, it's an aura, so it only affects my knight. So if my other monsters, my other allies, have a skill that needs a mind boost, alright, this vigilance resist is not going to help them. It's only going to help my knight. But on my knight, I gotta get out of here to show you. And these menus could be a lot faster, couldn't they? Alright, that took long enough. But on my knight I have the essentials. I have my Gale Armor to protect me from attacks, and I have my assault progress. So what more do you really need? I mean, an assault disturb and stuff like that would be nice, but I have a very strong, very fast and strong offensive team. So I'm counting on my Gale Armor to protect me, and also my high attack to allow me to destroy my opponents before they get an attack on me. And the vigilance resist again is going to act double duty. So if somebody disturbs my intelligence, it's really not going to have any effect on me because I've leveled it to 10. What else is there? Let's just show you some cool skills. So this is a skill on this guy called Desperado. Desperado is pretty cool. It's a passive skill, and at the start of a turn, this monster has a chance of increasing the attack and dealing damage to one enemy. Whenever you see a skill that says increases attack, that basically means it's giving you a great boost to your intelligence. It's almost like an aura, or to your attack, or whatever skill it says. If it says increases, it's an aura. If it says greatly increases, that's equivalent to a spirit. But this is a really cool skill because there's instances where the enemy might be faster, but this Desperado is going to preempt their speed essentially and have a chance at hurting them. The downside is at level 10 it's only 35%, so the proc rate is kind of low. But what's neat about that skill is that skill happens at the start of a turn, so even if the enemies are faster than me, I'm still going to get my attack off. Now there's another monster that does something similar. Desperado is teachable, so you can teach it to any monster you want. Now this AZI monster, his skill is not teachable, and it's a really cool skill. This says, so Desperado attacks an enemy, has a chance of attacking one enemy at the start of my turn. So if I have Desperado at the beginning of the turn, alright, I have a chance at attacking one enemy, regardless of the enemy's speed. This skill is similar to Desperado. As the enemy takes action, this skill activates and interrupts by increasing my attack and dealing damage to the monster and applying the silence effect. At level 3 it's 26%. I forget what it is at level 10, but it could be higher than 35%. I'm not totally sure. But this is a really cool skill because right when the enemy is about to make their attack, alright, this skill can interrupt that and basically take effect before they do their attack. So let's say I have a monster that's going to cast an attack skill, that gap unit that was going to cast that Lemmy skill. Alright? As my gap goes to do its attack, if this procs, it can interrupt my Lemmy skill, my gap attack, and it will increase this guy's attack and also deal damage to my gap. And then it will apply the silence effect. And what that does is if I try to cast that Lemmy skill, I'll be silenced and I won't be able to cast it. So this is really a fantastic skill. The downside is it doesn't pierce guard, it doesn't pierce barrier. But a lot of people will use this with like a Glassa unit to fight an enemy that's unguarded, it doesn't have a barrier, and you can really do a lot of damage because you know an enemy is going to have 3 monsters in their team, a front leader and a back, so you have 3 opportunities for this to proc, one on each of the enemy units before the enemy takes their turn. So we're back at the arena. I found an AZI. Let me see if we can test it out. See what happens. Now AZI is good against echo units. We call this we typically call a 111 monster count unit something else, but I'm not gonna call it that in this video because who knows what kind of red flags it would raise with the government or whatnot. So we're just gonna call it an echo unit. And it's really, an AZI is really great against echo units. Alright, so my dragon was about to attack. Alright, but right before its attack, the AZI skill procced. And it procced in response to my initiating an attack. And it doesn't pierce barrier, it doesn't pierce guard, it just does one attack, and in this case I had a barrier, so my barrier was destroyed, but it applied silence to me, so I can't do any attack. Now my Vitra attacked. Now the AZI skill tried to proc again here. It doesn't show that, but we know it did, but it failed, so it didn't proc, and my AZI was able to attack. The same thing with my dragon. Let's go down here. See if it procced again. Nope. Let's fight him one more time and see if we can get it to proc. Oh, I won this one. That doesn't look good. So I'm hoping I can see it proc against my Vitra, and I didn't. So this is another skill. I guess as we look at this stuff, we'll just look at skills as they come along. The Vitra is a really fantastic monster. It's a 4-cost dragon, and it's got this skill called Black Hole. And Black Hole is insane. It's completely based on intelligence. Some skills are based on intelligence, some skills are based on attack. All skills are based on monster count. If it's a normal attack skill, clearly you're going to be limited in damage to 1.1 times your monster count per hit. But for an active skill, all right, it's not necessarily limited to that factor. So if you boost up your intelligence high enough on like an intelligence-based skill, you can do extreme damage simply at 1 monster count. So I have 1 monster count on my team here. He has full monster count on his team. I boosted up my attack to 18,000, all right, because Black Hole is an intelligence-based attack, and so I was able to do 6,000 damage with simply 1 monster count. So, and this is called an Echo unit. So you can build a really powerful unit with no monster count essentially, and if you use the right skills. And the benefit to this is clearly, I mean, we're in the arena right now, so we're just testing stuff out. But if this was a real battle, all right, it would take him a long time to rebuild this monster count. But it doesn't take me any time to rebuild my monster count because I only, everybody always has 1 monster count. So an Echo unit, we can talk about those later and how to make them. They're very, very strong units. As you can see, the enemies, we're still talking about Black Hole here, while we look for this AZI skill to proc. The enemy has Gale armor on them, and they also have a barrier. But what's so phenomenal about Black Hole is not only can it do very extreme damage at a low monster count. So I have a very low monster count. My Vitra has a 1 monster count. Not only can it do great damage with a high intelligence at a low monster count, but it also negates all the buffs of the enemy. So the Banshee's intelligence negated, attack negated, guard negated, barrier negated. It negates all of that first, and then it does the attack. So the AZI skill went off again right before my dragon went to attack, and it broke my barrier. I didn't take any damage because I had a barrier though, but it silenced me. But I was still able to carry out my attack. I just did a normal attack. I'm prevented from doing a skill-based attack, like an active attack. If this AZI had its skill proc on my Vitra, then Black Hole would be prevented from casting. And I really want to show you that. I just don't know how many more times I'm going to have to do this to actually show that to you. So I lost this battle. Nope. So as you can see, it's taking me quite a number of tries to try to get this AZI to proc on my Vitra before my Black Hole. You have to realize that the AZI skill has a very low proc rate. It might not be leveled right now. That's one thing. But even if it is leveled all the way to level 10, it still has a semi-low proc rate. So I've gone through 4 or 5 different battles here, and it hasn't procced yet to silence my Vitra. So keep that in mind that it might be a really cool skill, but if the proc rate's too low, it's just never going to happen. So speaking of low proc rates, there's something you can do to increase the proc rate of all of your skills, and that's called Mischief. It's an extremely valuable skill, my Mischief cast, and so everybody on my team's skill chance of occurring increased. So now we're getting into some of the really cool skills. Let me show you what Mischief looks like. It's on a 1.0 cost monster called a Puck, and they're very expensive at auction. At auction, you'll see them for 1,000 DP easy. They're very expensive because they're so invaluable. Every single team can benefit from a Puck, and I mean that's not, or Puck's skill Mischief, and that's hard to be said about any other skill. So this is a Puck. It's kind of cool looking. 1.0 cost. Its stats, the intelligence is very good and the speed is very good, but its attack and defense are not good at all. This is clearly not a monster you're going to want in the front. This is clearly not a monster you're going to want to use as an attack monster. This is just a monster you're going to put in the back, away from everybody else, and use it for its skills. Now Mischief increases, it's a startup skill. Alright, increases skill chance of occurring of all allies at the start of combat. Cast success will be determined. So it's a startup skill. It basically increases the chance of me doing anything. Alright, during the battle. It lasts for 3 turns. And what's so cool about this skill is, in regards to startup skills, if Mischief is cast, it will make, to find a startup. This is Defend Disturb. It's a startup. It will make a level 7 startup skill. Now, level 7 startup skill, it always procs, but how often will it stick on all of my allies or all of the enemies? Maybe 70% of the time. So 30% of the time, it's not going to stick on everybody. You can level this all the way to 10 to make it stick on everybody, or you can use Mischief. Mischief essentially turns a level 7 skill into a level 10 skill. And as long as Mischief is cast before the skill in question. So in regards to startup skills, if you want Mischief to help your startup skills, you'd have to you'd have to have Mischief on a slower monster. Alright, it could be 1 speed slower, but you'd want it on a slower monster. And it will essentially make this level 7 Defend Disturb act like a level 10. And so your Defend Disturb will stick on the enemies 99% of the time. That's how powerful Mischief is. I don't know the exact numbers, but for a non-startup skill like, this is Fluid Barrage, Earth Barrage, like this is 24, I don't know the numbers. It might turn that into the equivalent of like a 34% skill, or maybe a 40% skill. Mischief really increases the chance of anything occurring. Now for active skills, it doesn't matter when Mischief was cast at startup, because the active, inherently, if Mischief is a startup skill and the active skills only happen during a turn, Mischief was in fact cast before the turns. But in regards to helping a startup skill, Mischief would need to be cast before your startup skills, or the ones that you wanted to help out. It's extremely powerful, and you can learn it by using a Puck. You can just use your Puck. Puck's a really great unit by itself because it is a 1-cost monster, and you are going to be cost limited. So a lot of people will just use a Puck and put skills on the Puck because the Puck's so cheap, and the intelligence and speed is really a really good amount for this 1-cost monster. But maybe you just want to teach Mischief to something else. If you level it to 7, you can use it to teach Mischief to another monster. A lot of people do that. This is one of the key core skills in the game. It's so invaluable. So for your Echo units, my Vitra team that you saw with the Black Hole skill, you'd use Mischief to increase the opportunity of Black Hole casting. I believe at level 10, Black Hole's 40%. 40% for Black Hole, and its active skill. So maybe Mischief would turn that into like a 60% chance of casting, or like a 50% chance of casting. So Mischief is a fantastic skill to have. What other skills can we talk about? Oh, this is cool. Alright, so, well, I want to talk about these super rare skills, but a lot of people don't have them. So let's talk some more about these rare skills, and even uncommon skills. There's a lot of skills on the spreadsheet from these uncommon and common monsters. Like, I don't want to skip over stuff, but so like this common bat has something called Blood Drain, it increases the attack, and it attacks an enemy and recharges the monster count of this guy based on the damage caused. So if I boost his attack up and I attack an enemy and I do 5,000 damage to him, I have an opportunity based on my intelligence, all right, of recovering some monster count. A lot of skills are based on the strength of the skills. The strength of whatever happens in the skills can be based on the stats of the monster casting those skills. You know, a mind boost is based on the intelligence of the person casting it, and also the amount of the intelligence on the person receiving the mind boost. You know, if I'm a very smart caster, I'll cast a very strong mind boost. But if I'm casting it on a really dumb ally, like a dumb orc or something like that, all right, or this bat's really dumb. I mean, it's intelligence 0.4, so the rate of growth per level is extremely low. So my intelligence on this bat's always going to be very low, and even if I have a very strong mind boost, his intelligence is going to be low. So a lot of these skills are dependent on a corresponding stat. Blood Drain, for instance, the amount of damage is going to be based on his attack, but also the recharge amount is going to be based on the intelligence to some degree. These are some common skills, but nobody really uses them anymore. I mean, maybe they were cool back in the day, but everything's been kind of replaced by your skills on rare cards and uncommon cards and whatnot. This is Brain Spike, increases attack once to an enemy. Hell Cloud increases the attack and once, that means attacks an enemy once. So it's going to boost his attack. It's going to attack an enemy, but then it's going to also reduce my monster count after the attack. How stupid is that? Nobody really uses these skills anymore. I mean, there's some handy skills that people still use, but for the most part, nobody really uses common skills anymore. Hysteric Hold. This is pretty cool. This is going to stun an enemy. So if I go to battle and it's my Windblade's turn, I now have a chance of stunning the enemy. The rate of growth for this skill is very high. I think at level 10 it's like 70%. So I can stun an enemy. There's a newer version of this skill that a lot of people use called Distress Hold. Now, Hysteric Hold would stun the enemy, and that would be the end of my Windblade's turn. What the Banshee does is it boosts the Banshee's attack and attacks an enemy and also stuns a random enemy. So this is a lot better than Hysteric Hold, because not only am I going to stun somebody, I'm also going to get a boosted attack and attack somebody. So as you go up in rarity for the cards, the types of skills that they have do kind of get better. You know, your super rare cards are going to have really cool skills, whereas your common cards are going to have kind of boring skills. Just some more random skills we can talk about. Here's Illstorm. It's passive, reduces attack of all enemies in range for 3 turns at the start of the action. Passive skills can happen either all the time, like an aura. An aura or a spirit's always going to boost your attack. They can happen at the start of the turn. That means before anybody does anything, regardless of my speed, this thing is going to happen. This skill is going to happen. Or it can happen at the start of the action. The start of the action means this zombie wolf's action. So whenever this zombie wolf is going to have his turn, you know, and that's dependent on speed. Whenever he has his turn, there's an opportunity for this to cast. Illstorm is kind of cool. Nobody really uses it a lot, though, because it's hard to use certain skills that are dependent on speed. Passive skills that are dependent on speed. Like here's another passive skill. Or maybe it's active. Yeah, this is active. Increases attack. Attacks 1 time for all enemies in range. Skill range 2. There's better skills than this right now. This teaches, what's kind of cool about this unit is it teaches a very useful, this was an incredible skill back in the day. It's called Round Bloom. Round Bloom's an intelligence-based attack, and so you level this to level 5 up here, and Round Bloom would be your top skill to teach. It used to be really amazing back in the day, and it's still useful now. It has a 35% chance of proccing at level 10, and it will attack all of the enemies. So the range is 5. So you can stick your round bloom unit or monster in the leader position away from everybody else, so kind of protected. Leader is your protected spot, and it will attack all of the enemies. This dwarf has a passive skill, and I was telling you about the difference between something that, passives, again, they can take effect all the time like a spirit or an aura. They can take effect at the start of that particular monster's action, or they can also take effect at the start of the turn. There's a lot of there's a lot of description typos that Sega has done, unfortunately. So some of these passive skills will say start of turn, and it really isn't. The Dwarf Knight is one of the only cards that does happen. His skill does take effect at the start of the turn. Start of turn skills are pretty cool because, again, it's not dependent on speed. So regardless of this dwarf speed, even if the enemy is faster than me, my passive skill will still proc first, as long as the as long as it actually procs. Clan Pride's a new skill. It's really sick. It does two things. It basically acts as the defend shift, and also a provoke. A provoke takes the attack of all of the enemies, a normal attack. So if somebody goes to attack my team, and let's say my dwarf is in front, and I cast provoke, and the enemy has a Crimson Hell Knight, and he was normally going to attack my rear. If the Crimson Hell Knight becomes quote-unquote provoked due to this skill, all of the attacks will be focused on my Dwarf Knight, and not my reader or not my leader anymore. Let me see if I can show you provoke in action. Kind of neat. I'll show you Clan Pride in action, I mean. So I hope this video is okay, and I'm really just jumping around in a bunch of different battles, or in a bunch of different skills. I really don't have any order to talk about them. I just wanted to show you a bunch of them. A lot of them are kind of self-explanatory. So we're just going to kind of cover what the different skills do and stuff like that. And in a later video, we can actually talk about how to build an effective unit or whatnot. Alright, this is not a good example because I got my butt kicked. My Clan Pride did not proc. That's one of the downsides to Clan Pride. It's level 10 and the proc chance is 95%, but it failed. And so I died. But I'm guaranteed it will work here and I'll win. See? There you go. Alright, I won. What Clan Pride does... It failed again in turn 1. Can you believe that? Why did it fail? Wow. See, I have a 95% chance at level 10 of Clan Pride proccing, but it's failed twice so far to proc in turn 1. So sometimes Sega's algorithms don't really act like the percentages displayed. Sometimes your 35% proc chance skill will proc all the time, and other times your 95% chance proc skill won't proc often. It's very weird, but who knows. Alright, this is what Clan Pride does. Regardless of somebody's speed, you can see in turn 1 why didn't the... I guess I'm faster than the enemy. That's weird. I'll show you a better example. Alright, let's do this guy. I feel bad picking on weaker guys, but that's what we're going to do for this video. Alright. So remember, who goes first is based on speed. Alright? The Warlock is the fastest, so he went first. Then the Elder, and then the Lizard Man. Now I'm very slow, so I went last. Out of my team, though, this is the fastest out of my team, then my Bress, and then my Jack-o'-lantern. So, but even though I'm the slowest, Clan Pride is a skill that procs at the beginning of the turn. So before, even if the enemy's faster, my Clan Pride is going to go first. And it does two things. It boosts my defense, so it acts as a defend shift. And also it applies Provoke to all of the enemies. And what Provoke does, if you're looking at this, this isn't a great example because I'm not using the Provoke element of him. But assuming the Dwarf Knight was like in front, alright, the Provoke would take any normal attacks that were directed at these two, and he would take them all. Assuming the Dwarf Knight was here and the Provoke, had cast, he would take all the normal attacks from the enemies. One of the downsides to Provoke, though, is, remember, Provoke is one of the elements of this Clan Pride skill. One of the downside is that it doesn't take skill-based attacks. So if somebody casts a Round Bloom on me, alright, Provoke is not going to protect my other teammates from that Round Bloom skill. But there is a skill that will protect from not only normal attacks like Provoke, Provoke protects against normal attacks, but also against skill-based attacks. And that is called Chivalry Stance. You can forget all this. Basically what Chivalry Stance does is, and it's at level 10 it's an 80% chance of proccing, is you put your Chivalry Stance unit in the front, alright, and if somebody tries to attack the rear or the leader, the Chivalry Stance unit is going to take all the damage, alright? And it doesn't matter if the attack is a skill-based attack like a Round Bloom or a normal attack like Grand Slam or Onslaught, he's going to take all the damage. And Provoke, like I said, it's just going to take the normal damage. It's not going to take a skill-based attack. So Chivalry Stance is a lot better, although it's hard to teach. It's very easy to teach Provoke to another unit. It's not easy to teach Chivalry Stance. Here's a pure Provoke unit. Now remember, Clan Pride does two things. It does Provoke and it also acts as a defend shift. This is just the Provoke skill. And it's active and it takes attack from all enemies for 3 turns. It's not going to prevent skill-based attacks. And this is the difference between this and Clan Pride. Again, is Provoke's an active skill. So if this guy's really slow and he doesn't have an opportunity to cast Provoke, it's not even going to help you. So a skill that happens at the start of a turn, like Clan Pride, it's a fantastic skill because it completely eliminates speed from the equation. What else is there? There are cheaper skills that are pretty handy. A lot of people will use something called Typhoon, and Typhoon is intelligence based. Maybe on a unit with Typhoon you'd want like 1,000 attack and at least 100 intelligence. And what it would do is it increases the attack and attacks one time all enemies in range. So it's an active skill. It has a very high chance of proccing. The skill range is 2, so I'm going to attack the enemy front and rear. There are skills like something called Blossom, or Psychic Range, or Vigilant Spirit that you could add to the Storm Rider and turn his skill range into 3. I don't know if I talked about it before, but there's ways to increase the normal attack range of the monster, and there's ways to increase the skill range of the monster. Alright. Ways to increase the skill range would be Vigilant Spirit. That's going to give us 1 additional range to turn this into 3. So at the front position he could hit the enemy front, rear, and leader. There's something called Psychic Range. Now Vigilant Spirit is it's going to increase your intelligence and your speed. It's essentially like a spirit, Vigilant Spirit, and it gives you a range boost of 1. There's also something called Vigilance Resist that you could add to this, but that doesn't give you a range boost. Only Vigilant Spirit does. Psychic Range is something else you could add. Vigilant Spirit is easier to add, but Psychic Range requires a level 7 super rare to teach, and that will act as an aura for your intelligence. It increases your intelligence, 1.8 plus 0.12 times the level of your vigilance. I'm sorry, your psychic range. But it also it can increase range up to 3 additional points. So with the psychic range level 10, that would give you plus 3 additional range. So 3 plus 2 is 5, and that would let you put this guy in the leader position, and you could hit all the way to the enemy leader. Range 5 is, I can just show you from this example, right here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if from his position he just needs a range of 5 to hit everybody, all right, or at least to reach the leader over here. So if you put psychic range on your Storm Rider and level it to 10, he can hit everybody. His skill will hit everybody over here as long as it procs. There's another skill called Vigilance Shift, and that's like a shift or like a trick, and it works by increasing your intelligence, your speed, and your skill range of everybody. So those are the ways: Psychic Range, Vigilance Spirit, and Vigilance Shift are ways to increase your skill range. If you want to increase the range of the monster itself, you can use something called Burst Range. Let me show you some of this stuff as I'm talking about it. I might have already talked about this, I can't remember. So here's Burst Range. It continuously increases attack and range. Skill range depends on the monster itself. This is the typo, it should just say range depends on the monster itself, but Burst Range increases this range right here. So at level 1 it gives you plus 1 additional range, level 5 it gives you plus 2 additional range, at level 10 it gives you plus 3 additional range. So this, 3 plus 1 would turn into 4. So he could be placed in the rear position and hit the enemy leader. But that Burst Range skill does not help the Storm Rider Typhoon skill. Remember, Typhoon is a skill that's completely based on skill range. So if you want to increase this range so that Typhoon procs on all of the enemies, you'd want to use Vigilant Spirit or Psychic Range or something along those lines. But Typhoon is a very cool skill. Now, if you we talked about how a normal attack is completely based on, well, not completely, but in part based on monster count. So you're limited by the amount of damage you can do by about your monster count. So if you have enough attack, but you only have 100 monster count, you're not going to be doing more than roughly 100 damage. If you want to do 10,000 damage, you need about 10,000 monster count. Skill-based attacks that are based on intelligence can have less monster count if you boost your intelligence very high. So one of the, we said before, one of the benefits to having a lower monster count, like 1,000 monster count or 100 monster count, is that it takes a lot less time to actually make your unit. If you go out and fight a battle and you die, you have to reproduce all those units. Reproducing, 100 monster count is going to be, light years quicker than reproducing 10,000 monster count, and it's also going to be a lot less, costly. It costs resources to make this monster count. So if you have to make a lot less monster count, or don't have to make any at all with the Vitra, like let's say you use a Vitra and you have 1 monster count, you can send that out all day long. You're just limited based on your stamina. All right, you don't even worry about reproducing your monster count because you can take out 10,000 monster count with your 1 monster count just fine. So as you increase his intelligence, and he is this Storm Rider is a good unit. There's more super rare cards out there now. Back in the day with less super rare cards, this was just the cream of the crop unit because his stats are so phenomenal. He has great speed, great intelligence, his defense and attack are also really good, and his base skill is fantastic. It's still a very good card if you're trying to build on the cheap, build an uncommon team. So you put like a Mind Progress on your team or a Mind Shift and boost his intelligence up, and this Typhoon can do a lot of damage if the intelligence is high enough at lower monster count. Maybe you need like 1,000 monster count in order to do 5,000 damage. You can't do that with normal attack, but you can do that with Typhoon. So Round Bloom, you have Typhoon, and Round Bloom's kind of like the upgraded version of that, but the difference with Round Bloom is there's lower, I'll show you Round Bloom. It's a lower proc opportunity. this will be... why isn't that on there? The Blood Mummy's base skill is Round Bloom. Increases attack and attacks one time for all enemies in range, so the skill range is 5 to begin with. So unlike Typhoon, the skill range is already 5. You can put this guy in the leader position and hit all of the enemy. The downside is, though, at level 10, this is only going to be 35%, whereas at level 10 for Typhoon, it's going to be 50%. So you have a much higher proc chance with Typhoon than you do with Round Bloom. So you kind of have to weigh the options. Well, do I want a higher proc chance, but only to hit the front and the rear, provided I don't use like a range extending skill. Alright, let's look at some more skills. This Succubus is kind of interesting. It has a skill called Honey Trap on it. Now it's also an active skill. Skill range is 5, so you can put her in the leader position. It seduces one enemy and heals an ally with a moral heal at the start of next action. I would equate this almost like an upgraded version of Hysteric Hold. Remember, Hysteric Hold is going to stun one enemy, and that's all it's going to do for the turn. Distress Hold, the Banshee skill, which is teachable, is going to stun one enemy and also attack an enemy. What this is going to do is, it doesn't attack an enemy, but when it says seduces, that's essentially a stun. It's going to seduce this enemy, so the enemy is not going to have an opportunity to attack you. Alright? And what the enemy is going to do is it's going to heal your team. So this would be a really great unit or a great skill to put on a high defense team, because not only are you going to prevent, when your turn comes, you're going to prevent an enemy from taking their turn, right, because they're going to be seduced, but it's also going to heal all of your team come next action. Alright, I set up a battle to show you what Honey Trap does. I think it happened down here. There's a very high proc rate too. It's happens a lot. So we're in turn 3 now. My team with Honey Trap has Gale Armor on, so the heal's not going to be... The heal's always based on how much damage has been done versus your starting monster count. So if you have not suffered any damage, the heal's not going to be significant at all. But as you can see, my Succubus cast Honey Trap on the Paladin Lizardman, and that means he's preparing a Moral Heal activation. And then when his... Now I have 2 Paladin Lizardmans in here, don't get confused. This is the front one. So my back one attacks, but my front one, alright, during his turn, he's going to cast a Moral Heal. So he's not going... So what's kind of cool, like I said about a Moral Heal, is it's almost like a stun, because it prevents the enemy from using their skills or their attack or whatever. So it's going to stop them from doing the attack, but it's also going to heal your team. Now the reason why it's called a Moral Heal is because it's going to heal, in addition to your team, the seduced enemy. So the Paladin Lizardman, not the enemy team, just the enemy that was seduced. So the Paladin Lizardman was the one that was seduced, and it's his turn now, so he's healed, alright, and he also casts a Moral Heal and heals my team. So Moral Heal's a pretty cool unit to play around with. You'd want to use it on a defensive team. Realize that there's a lot of skills in this game that will do heals, but if you don't have a very strong defensive team, if your defense is not high, you're going to take max damage. Unless you can get your defense above their attack, you're going to take max damage and you're going to die in one hit. So it's almost pointless to be using a heal skill on a team that doesn't have high defense, because there's going to be nothing to heal. By the time you want to use your heal skill, you're already going to be dead. I should have showed you something else. I haven't talked about heal skills yet, so let's talk about some heal skills and look at what they do. One of the top tier heal skills is called Luminous Wind, and all heal skills are based on intelligence. Luminous Wind, when cast, heals your team Now only one guy on my team was healed here because only one guy had damage. But it also applies a regenerate effect to your team. And for, I think it's either 3 or 5 turns, you're going to have, I think it's 3 turns, you're going to have this regenerate effect applied to you. And what that's going to do is, before your attack, you're going to recover monster count. So I went to attack again, and I recovered 648 monster count, and then I did my attack. And that's because of my regenerate effect. Now it does wear off, though. Let's see if I can see where it wears off. So, but I couldn't find it wearing off, but see, I cast it again, so it reapplied the regenerate effect. And now if you see this, Paladin Lizardman can act normally now. So I can actually, the front guy, you know, I can actually do my attack. The reason why I couldn't act normally is because in the previous turn, you know, is when I had Honey Trap on me. So Honey Trap lasts 1 turn. You know, I'm going to be charmed or seduced for 1 turn. Sometimes you'll see something like this. The whim has no effect, so Moral Heal was not used. That basically means there was nothing to heal. You know, my team was at full monster count, and so a Moral Heal wasn't used. So, you know, the succubus charmed my dragon, but the succubus team was at full health, and so there was nothing to heal, and so Moral Heal didn't do anything. But the person that's seduced in that instance will still lose their turn. So Honey Trap's a really cool skill because it has, I think, an equivalent proc rate as Distress Hold, but it also, you know, it's gonna do the healing for you. So when would you want to use Distress Hold versus Honey Trap? Well, like I said, Honey Trap you want to use on a defensive team, a team with high defense. You're not going to want to use it on a team with weak defense. So a team with weak defense, you'd want to use Distress Hold because Distress Hold is going to do the attack and the stun. You don't want to, you know, use a heal because there's going to be nothing to heal because you're going to die right away. See what else we can talk about. Oh yeah, so we're talking about heals. The first was Luminous Wind, and you can teach that a myriad of different ways. The easiest way now, before you'd need like a level 7 Iron Golem, you know, skill level, or a level 7 Trent, but now you can teach Luminous Wind using an EPI at level 5. Remember, level 7 is the hidden skill. If you level this Prosper sign to 5, you can teach Luminous Wind. That's like the top tier healing skill. The next tier down would be either Cure Blast or Leaf Fragrance. So Luminous Wind is going to heal all your guys and regenerate for 3 turns. The heal is going to be much stronger than the regenerate. The regenerate's kind of limited to about, let's say, 600 monster count or 1,000 monster count. So your regenerate each turn is not going to fully heal you. So realize that. I did not understand that when I started using Luminous Wind, and I was really surprised, and it kind of ticked me off a little bit because I was figuring I'd get a full heal during the regenerate, and that's not the case. You essentially, based on, you know, depending on your intelligence, you're going to get the full heal when Luminous Wind is cast, but the regenerate's going to only be like 1,000 monster count. Leaf Fragrance is similar to Luminous Wind in that you're going to almost fully heal and then get this regenerate, but Leaf Fragrance is only applied to one of your monsters. Alright, so instead of being applied like Luminous Wind to your entire team, it only applies to one of your monsters. Then if we go down, there's something called Cure Blast. Cure Blast is very easy to obtain now. There's some rare monsters that will teach it right off the bat. What Cure Blast does is it's essentially a full team heal. So it's like the Luminous Wind, and it's going to heal your whole team, but it doesn't have any regenerate effect. But because, like I said, the regenerate effect is not that strong, you know, using Cure Blast might be just fine. Below Cure Blast, you know, the next tier down would probably be Rapid Healing, and let's see if I have one of those. A lot of different monsters have Rapid Healing as a base skill and also teach it. It says recharges the monster count of a friendly monster in range and removes status effects. That's this last part is pretty cool. All of the heals, Cure Blast, Luminous Wind, Leaf Fragrance, and Rapid Healing, when they heal, they also remove status effects. So if you're stunned, if you're poisoned, cursed, silenced, or whatever, healing will remove those status effects. So that's one bonus to healing. Rapid healing is kind of like, I guess, Leaf Fragrance, in that it would, do a very good job of healing you, but the difference is rapid healing is not going to have a regenerate effect. One more thing to keep in mind is the regenerate effect for Leaf Fragrance and Luminous Wind does not remove status effects. So the status effects will be removed when the Luminous Wind or Leaf Fragrance are cast, but if they're not cast again in the next turn, and just the regenerate happens, the regenerate is not going to remove those status effects if you happen to get a status effect in the end turn. I wanted to show you a poison resist real quick. This guy has poison resist. We talked about that about an hour ago. Can't believe this video is going so long. Trying to think if there's any other healing skills that are worth mentioning. So those are healing skills. There are growth skills, and the trick or treat. Remember, we showed you that happening when it procs. You're going to get about a 300 monster count increase. So that's a growth skill. It's not a heal in that it's going to recover lost monster count. It's just going to give you additional monster count. I'll show you another growth skill. This is the earliest, or the first growth skill that entered the game. It's called Dynas Progress, and it increases the monster count at the start of combat. Now this is kind of weird. This is a weird startup skill. Most startup skills, like I said, as you level them up, they're always going to proc, but the chance of them actually sticking on your team is going to depend on the skill level. Dynas Progress is a very interesting startup skill, so it's kind of like in its own separate category. Dynas Progress is always going to proc, but it's always going to stick on every one of your allies. So what's the purpose of leveling it up? As you level it up, the amount of growth that you get from it is going to increase. So at level 10, you could receive, I think it's like 3,500 monster count growth. And it's a progress, so it stacks every turn. Let me show you one of the logs we had. They had Dynas Progress. Unfortunately, right now there's no way to actually learn Dynas Progress aside from holiday cards. So this guy used some holiday cards to teach it. So this is 9,999 monster count. We're assuming this Dynas Progress is fully leveled up. I think it is, I'm not sure. It's going to give him at the start 3,500 monster count in addition to the 9,999. This guy is 15,000 monster count to start, and it gives him an additional 5,000 monster count. So again, Dynas Progress, it will always proc, it will always stick on everybody, alright? And leveling up simply increases the growth amount. The growth amount is dependent on the initial monster count, but also based on the actual level of Dynas Progress. So if you had a 1 monster count, if this breast and this ASP were 1 monster count, your growth would be like 5. All right, your increase would be like 5 monster count. It would not be 5,000. So this is based not only on the level of Dynas Progress, but also on the amount of monster count you have. So, but what this also does is it applies this growth effect, and this growth effect is going to, every turn before you take action, it's going to increase your monster count. And the monster count's a function of, of the initial amount here. So, kind of like the Luminous Wind, your growth, like your regenerate, is not going to be the original amount. So, like up here, we got 5,000 growth or increase, but down here we only get like 999. So the amount you get is going to be a lot less than the initial starting value. But it's really great. Dynas Progress is a fantastic skill because if you have high defense, your min damage is going to be about 300 that you're going to take per hit. So you can leave a battle completely unscathed. and have no monster count loss with Dynast Progress. You'll get some crazy people. A lot of Japanese people will have a lot of holiday cards, and they'll teach like two Dynast Progresses to their team, and they could start out with like 25,000 monster count, and it's just kind of insane the stuff that they're doing. So that's one example of a growth skill, or a monster count increase skill. So it's different than a heal in that it lets, like a heal will only heal you to the maximum monster count you have. So if your maximum monster count is 10,000, you can't heal above that. But a monster count increase, like Dynast Progress, will actually let you break that barrier and go beyond 10,000 monster count. Realize though that when the battle ends, you can never leave the battle with more monster count that you came in with. So you can't like have, let's say, 10,000 monster count, and then during the battle, like let's say you finally win the battle and you have 25,000 monster count. Right? When you leave the battle, you're going to go back to whatever you started with. You can't leave now with more, with 25,000 monster count. The game just doesn't work that way. I want to show you another growth monster. Maybe I'll just try him out. This next guy is called an Epi. I'll put him in my team and show you his skill. His skill is called Prosper Sign. So Dynast Progress was a startup, and like I said, it was in its own category of startups because unlike other startups where you have to level the skill up in order to stick, Dynast Progress always sticks, and leveling it up simply increases the amount of growth you're going to get. This is a passive skill, so it increases the monster count of all allies at the start of the action. Skill range is 2, so it's going to hit all your allies. Chance of occurring 60%. So you level it to 10, and this is going to be like 95%. So watch what happens when we use this guy. Arena, this is the arena we're fighting in. The arena is really cool because you can battle your own units, and the arena is a really great thing to test stuff out on. Oh, kind of got blurry for a second. Alright, so I cast Prosper Sign, and I get basically 1,600 growth. So I go above my cap of 10,000. I get 1,600, and as you can see, my dragon monster count. My dragon only had 1 monster count to begin with. He's only going to get 1 more. So the growth is very dependent on the monster count of the guy. One of the differences, so this is passive, and it happens when the Epi is going to take his turn. One of the differences between this and Dynast Progress is, in Dynast Progress, the growth amount that you get is always going to be fixed. So remember in the previous screenshot we showed getting 9999 or, no, I'm sorry, 999 monster count, or essentially 1,000 monster count per turn. Prosper Sign is always based on your current monster count. So if it procs again, let's see if it does. Instead of getting 1,600, I get 1,800. And the reason is because it's always based on your monster count. So now my monster count is higher than it was before, so the amount of growth I get is going to be a lot more. So let's go down here, let's see if it procs again. I get even more. So my growth keeps going up and up and up. I've actually seen where they'll put First Lady on this Epi unit, so that Prosper Sign will cast twice, and they'll have 2 Dynast Progresses on the team too. And by like turn 3, the guys will have like 70,000 monster count. It can really be insane. And by the time an enemy has 70,000 monster count, how are you going to beat that? You can't beat that. It's pretty insane. So that's another growth skill. There's some other cards that have growth skills, but they're legendary cards and or debris mobs cards, and we can talk about those later. Let's just go back in and look at some more semi-common skills and see what they do. Alright, so we've shown this card before. This is an ASP, and its base skill is Dreadnought. We talked about, there's two ways to get a guard in this. Well, there's a couple other ways, but the main ways to get a guard in this game are Gale Armor, and Gale Armor is a startup. It applies to all of your team, and it's intelligence based, and also Dreadnought. Dreadnought is a fantastic skill. You can look at this, but essentially it's a guard skill that doesn't work based on intelligence, but works based on monster count. All right, as long as my monster count of this guy is significantly higher than the enemy, and it's on an attack by attack, a person by person basis. So, if the enemy front has 1 monster count, then Dreadnought's probably going to guard me. But if the enemy rear has 20,000 monster count, all right, my Dreadnought probably, this guy will probably, the guard will not work because the monster count will be a lot less monster count than him. But this is a guard skill that's going to continuously apply as long as my monster count is much higher than the enemy. Now, how much higher does it need to be? Like if I have 12,000 monster count at level 8 Dreadnought, I can fight a 10,000 monster count enemy and take, and the guard will always apply and take 1 damage. The amount of padding, so to speak, that you need, the difference you need between your monster count and the enemy monster count decreases as this gets higher. I don't know the exact numbers, but like at level 10, maybe you only need like a 1,500 monster count difference in order for guard to work. But the second you fall below their monster count or below that padding amount, you're going to start taking big damage. And this is an expensive resource-wise monster to produce. So you want to make sure that his monster count is high. So how can you, if you played the game at all, you realize, well, wait a second. I can only make 10,000 monster count. I can only make 9,999. How do I make more than that? I mean, how can Dreadnought ever be higher than a 9,999 enemy? Well, that's where you use something called enlistment. Now, what this does is it continuously increases the monster production speed and greatly increases the maximum monster count. So every level of enlistment you add lets you produce an additional 500 monster count. So at level 1, all right, instead of making 9,999 monsters, I could make 10,500. Instead of 10,000, I'd make 10,500. If I level this to level 2, I can make 11,000. If I level this to level 10, I can make 15,000 monster count. And with that, as long as I fight an enemy, that has as long as my monster count padding is enough. So if I fight an enemy that has 10,000 monster count and I have 12,000 monster count, assuming my Dreadnought is level 8, because if it's a little bit lower, then you need more of a padding. At level 3, you need a 3,000 monster count padding. So if you fought at level 3, a 10,000 enemy, monster count enemy, you would need 13,000 monster count. But that, like I said, it decreases as you go up. What's awesome about this is all startup skills, all Gale Armor, tricks, and shifts all last 4 turns. So after 4 turns, they're going to wear off. All right, you're no longer going to be guarded. You're no longer going to have your attack or your defense boost. Progresses and disturbs last 6 turns. But Dreadnought, it works all the time. As long as your monster count is significantly higher, it's always going to be applying. So Dreadnought's a fantastic skill because you can be stunned and it still works. If you're stunned, I told you that breaks guard. It doesn't break guard with this guy. The only way to beat this guy is have more monster count, or you could try poisoning him. Poisoning him would work, or lava hands would work. But a lot of people got really ticked off when this monster came out because there's only a certain number of ways to beat him. So you get an ASP, you put on Dreadnought and an enlistment in some kind of an attack skill. I put Cursed Infusion on, and I can send this out at 10,000 or at 12,000 monster count and defeat a level 6 tower all by himself. To beat a level 6 tower, usually you need like three, a 3 monster team, and you need crazy skills on him and stuff like that. I can just send this out, and you might even lose. I can send him out all day long as the stamina is okay, and beat a level 6 tower. So Dreadnought with enlistment is a game-changing unit. It's excellent for PvE, like NPC battles. It can be useful in certain circumstances for PvP, but realize, like, if regardless of what guard you have, whether it's Gale Armor or Dreadnought, this is very susceptible to a Lava Hands unit. And another difference is Dreadnought only works on this monster. So if you have other monsters on your team, they're not protected. Alright, only the ASP is. So you might be thinking, well, hey, wouldn't it be neat to have the ASP skill protect your entire team? Well, they have that. That's this guy. So essentially, this is the ASP skill, alright, but it works on everybody, all of your allies. So, and I don't know exactly if everybody's monster count needs to be really high. I know the 10% rule does play effect, but like if you had 15,000 monster count for this guy and like 10,000 for everybody else, would that work? I don't know. I haven't tested that, and I really don't care to because I'm not planning on making him into a unit yet. But think of this like the ASP. One of the downsides is his speed is atrocious. That's his starting speed, 1, and his rate of increase is like 0.1 per level. So, if you put every single last point into speed, by level 99 his speed will only be 68. So his speed is just atrocious. But like I said, it applies a barrier or a guard to your entire team. So there's really some cool tricks you can use to make a really interesting unit out of him. I don't want to talk about the Glassa and Breast units yet. Those are quote-unquote game-changing skills, and I want to save that for later. We talked about heals. Let's talk about steals. When this cat came out, people started to flip out. This is another like skill that just put the game on its head and really made people rethink their builds and stuff like that. Imitation Smile. So we have the puck. The puck's 1.0 cost, and this came out. The cat came out with the puck, and it's also a really cool card. At level 7, it teaches Imitation Smile. A lot of people just use him by himself, but the cat can be expensive, so sometimes people just level him up to 7 and teach his skill. But what his skill does is it basically lets you steal buffs and any heals that the enemy casts during startup or during the turn. So I want to show you an example of this. Alright, so I made this team right here to show you what Imitation Smile does. Imitation Smile steals startup skills, but also startup buffs, but also heals. So here's an example where my dragon cast Luminous Wind, and it healed the dragon's team. But my cat has Imitation Smile. Now it wasn't damaged, so it didn't get any heal from it, but the regenerate effect was applied to the cat. And so basically it stole the heal. I'm trying to see if we don't see it in action. But it can steal a heal from an opponent. So Imitation Smile is really cool in that respect. But more importantly, it can steal a buff too. Let me... let's try this guy. Wasn't expecting to win this one, but alright. So Imitation Smile is passive, so it's always going to be working behind the scenes. So in this instance, the enemy cast Mind Shift. and it boosted the enemy's team, but as you can see, it also boosted my cat because my cat is Imitation Smile. So my cat's intelligence went crazy high. And then Assault Progress boost, my cat stole it. Gale Armor, my cat stole it. Mirage Shift, my cat stole it. And then my team goes and casts its skills. So it's really cool because not only can you steal the heals, but you can also steal these startup buffs. So maybe you want, space is limited. You only have 9 slots for skills on your team, assuming we're not talking about a legendary monster with 4 slots. You have 9 slots to play with. Imitation Smile can do double duty and serve as multiple skills depending on who you're attacking. Realize though that when you fight an NPC, a lot of NPCs don't have buffs; they have tricks. And so, going into to fight a tower or an enemy land with Imitation Smile is probably not going to help you very much because, like I said, a lot of enemies just have tricks, and Imitation Smile is not going to do anything with the trick. So if you are buffed beforehand, let's say you have a Mind Shift on you, your cat will steal that, or whatever unit has your Imitation Smile, but then later on the enemy casts Mind Trick, your cat will then be tricked. Be back down at base stats. You won't be below base stats because you were buffed because you stole the initial buff. But realize that it just steals buffs, and it doesn't steal them for your whole team. Only the person with Imitation Smile steals it. But you can really build some cool units around this. A lot of people will put Imitation Smile on their Crimson Hell Knight. In addition to stealing the buffs and the heals, it also, I forgot to tell you this, it acts like a speed aura. So speed also increases depending on level, so that's like a speed aura, and at level 10 you're going to be at a 3 times multiplier. So if you have 100 speed, level 10 is going to turn into 300. 300 speed, level 10 is going to turn into 900. And at level 7, obviously, Imitation Smile, it teaches Imitation Smile. So a lot of people use this skill. This is another game-changing skill that when you make a build, you really, I got to talk about this later, but I want to mention something now. When you're making a build, you want to know what all these skills do, because you don't want to just make a unit and just go out and fight somebody, because you have to know what to expect. There's going to be all kinds of enemies you can face, and so you want to make the most multi-purpose build you can make. If you make a build with 3 different monsters that can only do one thing, you're not going to be very dangerous. But if you can make a unit that can beat 60% of the other units out there, that's going to be a very dangerous unit. Well, here's another heal skill. There's something I want to mention too about Imitation Smile before I go on. The only stuff it doesn't heal is stuff that affects only one enemy. So like rapid healing, for instance, only heals one guy. Alright? Imitation Smile is not going to heal that, or not going to steal that. Leaf Fragrance only heals one guy. Imitation Smile is not gonna steal that. There's something called Illuminate Tear. Imitation Smile is not going to steal that. And also self heals. Like there's something that Sitapati has called Dancy Macrabe. I can't even say it right. I mean, who says this stuff out loud? But what that does is at the beginning of the turn, right at the beginning of the action, it's a passive skill. It's going to attack somebody and also heal yourself. It doesn't. The cat doesn't steal the heal because it's a self heal. Trying to think what else. There's something called Soul Steal that I try to show you, but I don't have it. Soul Steal is a self heal. It heals the person casting Soul Steal, and Smile's not going to steal that. So just keep in mind, Smile's only going to steal stuff that that affects more than one person. If it just affects one person or it just affects the caster, it's not going to steal that. For the most part, I can't think of an instance where it does. Here's yet another heal right here. Bloody Pecco-y. Man, I'm going to get a lot of grief from my friends for saying all this stuff out loud and just butchering the names. Honey Trap, remember Honey Trap? It seduced an enemy and also had them cast System World Heal. This is kind of like that. What this does is it increases attack. It attacks once to an enemy, so it's kind of like your general attack skill. But it's also going to recharge your monster count depending on the damage caused. So if I do, and I think it's attack based and also intelligence. The heal is intelligence based, but the amount of damage is attack based. But the amount of heal is also based on the amount of damage done. So if you don't do any damage, all right, you're not going to get any heal. But if you do a lot of damage and you don't have much intelligence, you're also not going to get a lot of heal. This is the tricky skill to use because since it is based on attack, if somebody's guarded or has barrier up, you're not going to do any damage to them, and so likewise you're not going to get any heal. And there's a typo in here. It says it restores the monster count of a friendly monster. It actually it heals your entire team. This is not essentially a heal, so the cat doesn't steal it. This is a recharge. I guess you could say there's growths like Dynast Progress in the Prosper sign. There's recharges like this Bloody Pekoe, and there's also heals, which looks like Rapid Healing and Luminous Wind, stuff like that. So a recharge can't be stolen, and more importantly, the recharge is not going to eliminate status effects. So if I'm cursed or poisoned, Rapid Healing or Luminous Wind is going to cure me of that, but this skill will not, because it's simply a recharge and not a heal. There's Ravage Claw. This is kind of an older skill. It reduces the range. This is another typo. Reduces range to all friendly monsters for 3 turns. This is the typo. It actually reduces the range of all enemies. So if you want to reduce their range and hopefully they can't reach you, this is the way to do it. But this just reduces the range here. It doesn't reduce the skill range. So if somebody has like Round Bloom or Typhoon, those skill ranges will be unaffected. This just reduces the normal attack range. If you want to reduce the skill range, you'd want to use something like Vigilance Trick, and the reduction amount is always going to be 1. We talked about enlistment, a way to actually grow your monster count or produce your monster count above the maximum of 10,000. You'd learn it using this Dragon Tooth. You'd level him to 7. He'll teach. Well, he teaches Cure Blast at 5, but he also teaches enlistment at 7. Here's the 7 enlistment. This is still a very useful card. It existed a long time ago. And it's a lot of, when I say a long time ago, a lot of cards from back in the day don't have very much use now because new cards are coming out with new skills and whatnot. This is kind of a timeless card. It's always been useful, and it will probably always remain very useful. This is a Siren, and it has a startup skill called Frigid Voice. It applies a stun effect to one monster at the start of combat. Remember we looked at the Tatiana that cast that silence, that Summertime Nightmare, and that caused us to be silenced? And so if you cast it before everybody else, all of the enemies, you're not going to be able to cast your skills because you're silenced at startup. Well, this is kind of like that. It's not going to silence you, but it's going to stun you. And you're going to be stunned at startup, and what that means is you're not going to be able to cast your startup skills. And that's only if the Frigid Voice is cast before you go. Like if you have startup skills, like let's say you're going to cast Mind Progress, and somebody casts Frigid Voice on you, all right, that will stun you and prevent you, as long as you don't have like a stun resist or something on you, or Trick or Treat doesn't proc or something like that, or like the Veil effect. You'll be unable to cast your Mind Progress so long as that Frigid Voice was cast before you. But if somebody casts like Frigid Voice after you've already cast Mind Progress, it's not going to do any. It's not going to prevent you from casting that Mind Progress because it was already cast. Let's see if we can find a Siren team. So here's a Siren team right here. Let's fight him with this guy. I lost. I can probably tell you why I lost. Alright, so the Siren is slower than me, so it went first in startup. Remember, the slower people go first in startup, but they go last in the actual turns. So you want your Siren to be dirt slow. And he went first, he stunned my dragon. And then when you see my dragon, I was relying on my dragon's skills. But my dragon had 3 skills and it can't cast any of them because it's stunned. Alright? So Frigid Voice is a very dangerous skill because it can neutralize a lot of enemies. I mean, you're relying on casting your skills, and if you're stunned, you're unable to do that. And a way to prevent this would be if the stunned monster has stun resist. That's one way to use that. The Hawaiian girl, she's going to have that Earth Blessing with the Veil effect. That will prevent the stun. Or also, if you're stunned and you have Trick or Treat, as long as the Trick or Treat monster is the one that's stunned, it will remove all the status effects from everybody else. I want to show you a Medusa. It has a really cool skill, but I don't see it often in the arena. The Medusa has a skill called Gorgon Gaze, and it's a passive skill, and it happens right before the Medusa takes her turn. So it's not like the Clan Pride, which is going to happen at the beginning of the turn. So if you want the Medusa to go before anybody else, you need high speed. But what Gorgon Gaze does, it has a very high opportunity to stun an enemy at the beginning of the Medusa's turn. And in addition to stunning the enemy, the Medusa will, because it's passive, it will also have an opportunity to use a normal attack. So the Medusa does like double duty in that it stuns an enemy, but it also can do a normal attack. No, I don't see anything here. Let me go to the auction house and see if we can find one. Maybe just the pack would work. No. Medusa is an older card. She's been around for a long time, but her skill is still very deadly. There we go. Gorgon Gaze. Apply a stun effect to one monster at the start of turn. So this is not going to, unlike Frigid Voice, this is not, oh, and I forgot to mention something. If you're stunned, regardless of when Frigid Voice takes effect at startup, whether it's the slowest and it actually prevents you from, and it stuns you and it prevents you from doing your startup, or it's fast and it goes after the startup, you will remain stunned in turn 1. So in turn 1, you'll go from startup into turn 1 and you'll be stunned. So Frigid Voice does do those two things. It can prevent startup skills from being cast, but also it will keep the person stunned during turn 1, and the stun will wear off in turn 2. Medusa is different. Instead of stunning somebody and preventing startups, it's going to stun you right before the Medusa takes her action. This is another typo. It says at the start of turn. The stun effect applies right before the Medusa takes the action. So if the Medusa is very slow, all of the enemies will go first before the stun happens. But if the Medusa is really fast, the Medusa will stun somebody before Medusa takes action. It's already 60% at level 3. You level this to 10 and it's extremely high, like 80% or something. So there's a very high likelihood that somebody will in fact be stunned. And the really neat thing is, because this is passive, alright, any passive skill does not take away from the unit's or the monster's opportunity to do another attack. So you can put an active skill on here and let them cast that in addition to the Gorgon Gaze. You can put Grand Slam on here and Lava Hands. So this will not prevent the Medusa from doing another attack. So you can do your other attacks in addition to your Gorgon Gaze. That's what's really neat about it. I mean, heck, if you really wanted to do something special, you can put on First Lady. And that means Gorgon Gaze would proc twice. And you can put on Grand Slam down here, and Grand Slam could proc twice. So this could be a very deadly monster if used correctly. Or you could put Imitation Smile on. There's all kinds of different things you can do with the Medusa. Let's look at this guy. This skill is called Uncanny Evasion. I think at level 10 it's like 50% or something. What this basically does is lets you evade an attack. It completely prevents somebody from attacking you based on this chance down here. It's passive, so it always is in effect. And I believe that the new legendary monster called Baal, Baal or whatever, however you say his name, teaches this skill at level 7. I don't really know where to, what would be a good build with it, because, if it fails, if it doesn't proc, then then technically you could die. So, I mean, how could you make a good build out of this? I'm not really sure. But this is just another skill that you could mess around with. These are some older monsters. This is Title Slap. And this is, I forgot to mention this, there are skills now that say at the end of turn. So increases attack, deals damage once to all enemies in range at the end of turn. It also reduces defense. End of turn means whenever he goes, whether it's before the enemies or after the enemies, if this procs, it's going to say preparing Title Slap or preparing action or whatever. And then at the end of the turn, when everything else is done, when all the enemies and all the allies have gone, then this skill will take effect. Now there's a couple other skills, I forget the names of them, that also apply at the end of turn, like Abyss Stream is one of them. So, but be aware that this guy could be really fast, but skills like this are still going to go after all of the enemies have gone. And like I said before, it's important to get that first strikeout. Get that first strikeout, you kill the enemy, you prevent him from taking his turn. Skills like this aren't going to let you do that, because you're going to have to wait till the enemies have already gone before this can take effect. There's another skill called Volcano, and this actually makes you wait till the end of the second turn. So if this were to proc right now, you'd have to wait. If this procced in turn 1, you'd wait till everybody's gone in turn 1, you'd wait till everybody's gone in turn 2, and then it would finally go off. This is kind of like Black Hole in that it just kills, it removes all the buffs and stuff like that, and then it does this insane damage. But unlike, Black Hole doesn't have a turn wait period. This does. I mean, that's a big difference. This is a pretty cool skill that it nullifies all status effects. Remember we talked about, curse, poison, confuse, silence, all that stuff. And there's ways to prevent that. Curse and trick or treat, the veil effect, and then the individual resists, like stun resist or reflect or whatnot. This Adams does it all. It basically acts as a multi-purpose reflect. And here's your reflect chance down here. The only downside is, though, that this is, by itself, this is not really a nice skill. It doesn't really do anything by itself, and it's on a 4.5 cost monster. So you'd have to build a monster around this unit, or a unit around this monster, and it could be very hard to do, to make one that would be top tier to justify the super rare cost. This crystallized skill is really, nobody uses this guy because I think everybody thinks his skill's kind of junk, but it is really an interesting skill. When this guy takes action in turn 1, whatever buffs or debuffs he has on himself become permanent. Remember we said how Gale Armor is going to wear off in 4 turns, and a Progress is going to wear off in 6 turns, and a Shift is going to wear off in 4 turns? Well, this makes them permanent, and so they don't wear off until the end of the fight. Either 8 turns go by, or my team dies or the enemy dies. The downside is, of course, that it also keeps all the debuff effects. So if you're heavily tricked or heavily disturbed, and you don't have any good attack or whatnot, or you don't have barrier or guard, you can't acquire any of those. And that's a real detriment, because if somebody beats you out skill-wise, this guy's likely going to die. And one thing to note is there are certain exceptions, like if you have a barrier effect, a barrier is not going to become permanent. All right, so one hit is still going to remove the barrier. It's not the true. That's not true for guard. Sega didn't want you becoming invincible, so to speak. I don't see why not. I mean, it would have been a cool unit, but because some of these things like barrier and some other one-time deals don't work with crystallize, it kind of becomes a useless skill. Let's see what else we got. Not going to look at him yet. I don't know if I've ever shown you this. I've definitely talked about it. This is essentially a speed spirit for the entire team. Form circle. And the only way to learn this is through holiday cards. Invincible is neat. At the start of turn, so this is important to realize, this is, unlike atoms, remember atoms we looked at? Continuously nullifies all status effects. This happens all the time, whether it's at startup or whether it's during the turns or whatnot. This skill is at the start of turn, so just like the Medusa skill, Gorgon Gaze, right before this guy takes action is when this skill happens. And what this does is it removes all debuff effects and also applies barrier. So if this guy is like tricked and disturbed and stuff like that, alright, all that stuff's going to be removed so long as this procs. Alright, remember Atoms does not have a... Well, Atoms does have a chance. Yeah, Atoms always works, it just has a reflect chance. It's important to distinguish between them. So here's the reflect chance. So it's a 100% chance to remove all status effects all the time. But the reflect chance is right here. Whereas this skill, not only does it not apply all the time, it only applies before he takes action, but also it has a chance of occurring. But if it does proc, you get a complete debuff removal. It won't remove your buffs, it just removes debuffs, and also applies a barrier effect. So you're going to get like a Mirage Shift or whatever, but it's just for this guy. All right, it doesn't happen for the entire team, and that's kind of significant. Marduk. This is Sega a little bit ago changed a lot of active skills to passives. This is one of the active. It used to be active, now it's passive. So this is basically an assault shift and a defense shift to all allies in range. It lasts for 3 turns, and it happens at the start of the action. So before this guy goes, he has a chance of casting this. It's a low chance, but it's a chance. And like any other passive skill, you can put on active skills or other skills and it will not interfere. Realize one thing though, remember Onslaught and Grand Slam, those modify a normal attack, alright? And because of that, you want the normal attack to occur for a unit with, or a monster with Grand Slam and Onslaught. If you put on an active skill like Rapid Healing, alright, it's going to take away from those opportunities for your normal attack to occur. So for Grand Slam and Onslaught, and Poison Imbue, or any of the imbues, you don't want to take away the opportunity for a normal attack. And so you don't want any active skills on them. But for skills like this, which don't rely on a normal attack, right, this has no bearing on a normal attack, you can pair this with anything else. Alright? So this skill can happen in addition to a normal attack. Or you can put on an active skill like Distress Hold. So realize the difference between certain passives. Let's see here. This guy's interesting. He not a lot of people use him, but increases the attack. It's like Round Bloom. Attacks everybody in range. Also applies Silence Effect. So it gets pretty high at level 10. It's not a bad monster, but I don't think it justifies the 4.5 cost, but the skill's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think we've ever talked about this skill, though. This is great for an Echo unit, a 1 monster count unit. His skill is completely based on intelligence, and his intelligence, the higher the base intelligence, or the higher the base skill, the greater the rate of increase it's going to be per level. So 1.8 or 18 is going to give you about like a 1.9 or a 2.0 growth per level. So this monster can potentially have a very high intelligence. And this is the great skill. It's active. It removes buffs for an enemy in range. Right? So it's going to remove the guard, remove the barrier, and all that stuff. It's going to increase his attack and also attack the enemy in range. and it's going to prioritize it against your monster with highest intelligence. And that's really cool because a lot of people will place their high intelligence monster in the leader position. And remember, all you have to do is kill the leader in order to win the battle. So you use this monster, this gap, and if this skill procs, it's going to remove all the buffs, all the barriers, all the everything, and then it's going to attack probably the leader because that's the guy with the highest intelligence, and you'll win the battle. And the skill proc range gets to be about pretty high at level 10. And also, in addition to his semi-decent proc rate, it's range 5, so a lot of people will put him in the leader position, and he'll be able to do a lot of good things from that position. This Furfur is a newer monster. Think of it like Grand Slam, so it greatly increases attack and once randomly attacks enemies in range 3 to 5 times. So instead of 2 to 4 times like Grand Slam, it's 3 to 5, but it also applies the curse effect. And the proc rate is very high. I think at level 10 it's like 70% or something like that. So it's a very high opportunity to proc. A lot of people though will level it to 7 and use him to teach Curse and Fusion. So this, you have to decide what you want to do. Do you want to use him or not? He can be a great echo unit. We'll talk about that later. But his stat growth is great. Very fast, very smart, and good stats for attack and defense. We're not going to look at the legendary monsters yet. Some other just random monsters nobody really uses. This is Curtain Call. It's passive. Does certain things at different turns. At turn 1, it's going to remove all status effects, I believe, from all your monsters. Then it's going to return on turn 3, restore the monster count of all your monsters, and then turn 6 is going to do both combined. You have your proc chance. It's really high at level 3. I think this skill is teachable by some kind of a super rare, but I haven't really found a good use for him. This girl, I guess, teaches this decoy effect. Think of a decoy effect like a barrier, like a mirage shift or something, but the difference is that the decoy effect is going to actually have its own monster count, so like its own durability, so to speak. So, and the amount of durability will increase the number of times it's activated. So I'm just going to make some numbers up right now. Like, let's say you cast it, and it's also based on her monster count. I think the monster count of everybody individually. So at 1 monster count, the durability you're going to have of the decoy is only going to be 1. But at like 10,000 monster count, the durability, like let's say, could be 2,000. All right, and then the next time it's cast, the durability could increase by 3,000 for a total of 5,000. And this goes up and up and up. And essentially, in order to actually attack her, you'll have to, or anybody else on her team, you'll have to first get through these decoy units' durability. So this is an interesting skill. I don't see a lot of people using them, but it does have its uses. The proc rate is decent. I mean, this is level 3, 31%. I assume it's like 45% at level 10. This Wild Hunt is another interesting skill. It's an aura, essentially, for attack, defense, intelligence, and speed. But it also greatly boosts your maximum monster count. So it's going to act like your enlistment, which is teachable by your Dragon Tooth, but also act like an aura. So I guess if you can put this on instead of enlistment, then do that. But I've seen people use that card before, but it's not that interesting. This is a newer card that came out. This is a Grim Reaper. Think of it like a Round Bloom skill that attacks everything in range. It's going to have a high proc rate at level 10, so probably maybe 45% or something like that, or 40%. But what's really neat is it completely ignores the enemy's defense based on the level of this. So, the enemy could have 1,000,000 defense, and this is just going to eat right through it. Because because of this factor. And in addition, it's also going to increase the attack. So I haven't tested this as an echo unit, but I assume this would do really amazing damage at low monster count. But it won't pierce guard. It won't break barrier. Well, it will break the barrier, but it won't go through the barrier on the same turn. Diamond Dust is a crazy skill. Again, it's gonna, like everything else we've been looking at, it's gonna attack everything in range. The skill range is 5. It attacks everything in range, but it also applies the stun effect. Now, whether or not this stun effect applies is a random chance. All right, so if you attack 3 enemies, everybody will be damaged, and then there's a random chance that everybody's also going to be stunned. And what's really interesting about this skill is this stun is going to last for 3 turns. So they're going to be stunned for 3 turns. So this can be a very deadly skill if the stun effect actually applies. And people used to use her the Ice Queen by herself. I think the skill has kind of people don't use it as much now because it doesn't break guard, and you have this ASP with guard. You have the Great Wall skill, that's a guard skill, and you have these other guard-based skills which can kind of make this skill ineffective. So, but the neat thing about this is this will break guard on a Gale Armor guard. It won't break an ASP guard because the ASP guard is stun proof essentially, but the Gale Armor guard can be broken by this. Commander Howling is the Werewolf Leader is a newer monster that came out. So this is passive. It pursues enemies at a set chance for all dehuman race. At the end of the action, however, the target effect excludes itself. What this essentially means is, after this Werewolf Leader takes his turn, if this procs, any other demi units have an opportunity to cast again. Alright, so let's say you have an OSM, an Orc Swordmaster, and let's say he went before this guy, alright, and now your Werewolf Leader goes, alright. If this skill procs, that OSM is going to then go again. So it's kind of like First Lady in that it gives gives somebody else another turn to go, but it doesn't take away from anybody's turn. As long as this procs, everybody else gets another turn so long as they're of the demi race. I think I've shown you Dark Dominion before. This is an aura for all undead monsters and a negative aura for all non-undead monsters, but it applies to everybody, so including the enemies, so you have to be careful. This is one of the few skills that will go through guard. A lot of the skills, Round Bloom, Typhoon, Diamond Dust, stuff like that, doesn't go through guard. So if somebody has guard, they're going to be protected from the damage. This Ocean Pain skill actually goes through the guard. It says the skill's effectiveness also increases based on the number of times it activates. I assume the damage just gets stronger. I don't really know what that means. But, the skill range is 5. It's got a decent proc rate at 10, maybe like 35 or something like that. The downside is, though, that this is on a 4.5 cost monster, so that's going to take away your opportunities to use other high cost monsters. But this is one of the few skills that will go through guard. This is the new super rare beast, Cyclone Nest. Think of it like Grand Slam, but it's an active skill, not a passive. A lot of the active skills that are attack-based skills do the same stuff. They'll attack everybody in range, and how they do it just kind of varies. So this is going to attack everybody in range 2 to 3 times. So it's kind of like Grand Slam a little bit, but it's going to prioritize the attack against people without guard. Of course, that's going to be range limited. But this is skill range 5, so it can attack everybody. And the Second Strike Onward will prioritize attack against the same monster. It's kind of an interesting skill. I mean, the cool thing is that it's on a beast. There's not a lot of... Beasts kind of get the short end of the stick. They don't get a lot of good cards and stuff like that, so having a new beast every now and then is kind of neat. Here's a very interesting card, and it might take a second or two to explain this skill. This is an Osiris, and his skill is really neat to play around with. Basically, when an ally or an enemy, except itself, is incapacitated, so dies, all of the monster count is increased by the reduced monster count of itself. This The skill doesn't really make sense. Sega has a really poor translator or something. What this basically means is, if an enemy or an ally dies, that monster count from their death is added on to the Osiris. And so, let me go to Arena while I talk, so I can show you this happening. If if the Osiris is fighting somebody, in a unit, in that unit, and somebody dies, and they lose 10,000 monster count, right, the Osiris is going to gain that 10,000 monster count. The easiest way to explain it is just show it to you. Just have to find it. Alright. I guess I'll use this guy. See if we can win. I have high hopes. I lost. Look at that. You probably cheated or something. Alright. Watch this Osiris. You got to be careful with Clan Pride, because as you can see, they cast Valiant Trick on me, which decreased my defense. So when I was relying on Clan Pride to boost my defense, it just negated the reduction to begin with. So I didn't get the boost, and so that left me open to attack. So Clan Pride can be dangerous if you're not careful. Trying to find a good example to start discussing this at. I don't see any growth from the Osiris yet. Let me battle him again. Okay. I guess with this team I can't talk about the Osiris skill until I talk about this Last Moments skill. Last Moments is a skill that basically when the monster with its passive skill, and when the monster with Last Moments dies, all of his monster count that he originally started the battle with is given to each of the allies. So he started monster count reduced 10,000. The martyr started with 10,000 monster count, and so Last Moments proc, because he died. Martyr rendered unconscious. He died, and so his total monster count reduction was 10,000, and so his allies, the Osiris and the Dragon, get the 10,000, and so it's I've reduced their monster count some, so they get whatever they have plus the 10,000. But then the Osiris skill procs, and the reason why it procced is because the martyr died. All right, and you say, well, wait, where does 22,000 monster count come from? I'm thinking 3891. Essentially, it takes any lost monster count from all of the allies and gives it to the Osiris. So it's kind of like Last Moments, but it works a little bit different. So because I can't explain the numbers right now very well, but because the martyr lost at least 10,000 monster count, that is given now to the Osiris, because he died. Now look over here. The martyr came back to life, and that's why he came back to life, and then I killed him again. And now the dragon died. Now get this. The Osiris skill procced again. Alright? And so the reduction amount is 31,000. What's really interesting, and this is why I wanted to show you the battle log, is this monster count reduction is additive for the entire battle. So this is his current monster count reduction, alright, the current monster count reduction, plus the previous monster count reduction when, before. So this can eventually get to be, an astronomical number. That's what's really cool. It's not just like the current monster count reduction, it's the whole monster count reduction from all the allies from the entire battle. And so you look again. So the martyr died. The Osiris, his skill procced, he got 31,000 additional monster count. So it brings him to about 4,000 plus 32,000. So he's looking at 4, 5, 6, like 36,000. But then Last Moments procs again. Alright? And the Last Moments is also based on the cumulative monster count from the entire battle. Because look, the martyr only had 5299 monster count, because that's how much damage he took, and it went down to 0. Alright? But 5298, if you add 9999 to 5299, you'll get this number right here. So the whole thing's cumulative. So he came back to life, he died again, Last Moments procced again, and now this 15,000 monster count is added to both the Osiris and the dragon. But then, because of that, the dragon, who died? The dragon came back to life, the resurrect right here, but still the Osiris procced on the initial death, and the monster count for the dragon was reduced this much, so it got added on. So right now you're probably like, what the hell is he talking about? Essentially, what I'm saying is the Osiris now has 75,000 monster count. Right? That's an amazing amount of monster count, and now it's added even more because I died. So this is my team. My Vitra died. Now my Vitra only had 1 monster count. All right, but then the Osiris gained another 31,000 monster count. See, 31,406, 31,405. So my 1 monster count went into here. All right, but again, it's cumulative. So now the Osiris is at 100,000 monster count. Look, Chain Vortex killed my dragon, and the Osiris skill procced again. Now he's at 130,000 monster count. Now he's at 155,000 monster count. Now he's at 180,000 monster count. I mean, you can get to insane numbers using this Osiris and his skill. So let's talk about Resurrect, because you're like, whoa, wait a second, people are coming back to life. So let me show you that. So this is a Resurrect skill, Garnet Baser, and it gives everybody the opportunity to come back to life 1 time if they die during the battle. And when you come back to life, you regain about 60% of whatever monster count you started the battle with. So if you started the battle with 10,000 monster count, you'll come back to life at about 6,000 monster count. I want to say this now just because we're talking about this skill. But some of you guys that aren't familiar with the Glassa won't understand this. The Glassa, the demon, will not clear or not wipe this particular skill, and also the Dynas Progress skill. Those are 2 skills which cannot be wiped from startup, but all the other startups can. So this is a very, very special startup skill in that not only does it bring you back to life, but it's immune to the Glassa's Oblivion Shift skill. And this is a way to teach Psychic Range. Remember, Psychic Range is like burst range. At level 1 you get +1 skill range. Level 5 you get +2. Level 10 you get +3. But I would much prefer just to keep him, or keep her, I suppose, and use her for her Resurrect skill. Let's see if I have the last moments around here. Stormwood, I believe that's the name. Here we go. Last moments. So when this monster is defeated, increased monster count. It increases the monster count of all allies, and lost units for this monster determine the increased monster count, and it's cumulative again. So if you pair this with a resurrect, all right, if he dies a second time, the amount of increase distributed to the allies will be, it could be 20,000. So it could be quite a significant number. Let's talk about the Martyr, because we just experienced that. The Martyr's a really weird monster. It's like, this is the suicide bomber of the monsters. It's going to increase attack, defense, intelligence, speed of all allies, excluding itself, depending on the monster count. So the amount of buff that you get is stronger the more monster count this guy starts the battle with. The downside is, after he casts his sacrifice skill, it's passive, so it casts right before he does his turn, he dies. So, that's the sacrifice. I'm trying to see if he has any TNT. I guess that's a powder keg or something like that he's holding. You can pair him with a, that resurrect skill, and so he'll cast his skill in turn 1, come back to life, and then in turn 2, if he does take his action, if you have not killed the enemy, he'll die again. So, he's really good in arena, because in arena, you don't have to produce monster count. You can just make whatever you want. But in actual real life and in real battles, people really have not found a good use for him yet, because it would be very expensive to use him, because you'd have to continually make, produce him, because he'll keep dying. Now his teachable skill is Little Bless. Remember we looked at that dragon, that this dragon teaches Resurrect. Another way to learn Resurrect is through, or another way to, that skill is not teachable, but the actual effect Resurrect is. Piss You Hand, I guess that's how you say it. I have no... Shoe Hand? Anyways, it's an active skill. It applies Resurrect to one ally, 21%, so I think at level 10 you're like at 35 or something like that. It's neat, so this is kind of like equivalent to the cat. It's a nice rare. It's 1.0 cost. It's a fairly expensive monster at auction. But honestly, though, I would probably prefer to use Mirage Shift or something like that as opposed to this, because Mirage Shift is, or not Mirage Shift, Mirage. Mirage is an active skill also, but it's going to apply Barrier to your entire team. And I know Barrier is different than a Resurrect, but at least all of your team, I mean, you can almost equate Resurrect to a Barrier. It gives you almost one hit of protection. So you get hit, you die, you come back to life. Resurrect does save you monster count. If you get hit and you die, you'll come back with more monster count, 60% or whatever. But with Mirage Shift, hopefully you don't die. Hopefully you just get that one hit. It kind of differs on what you'd want to use, though, I guess. If you were being attacked by, let's say, Grand Slam, if you had a barrier on and a Grand Slam hit you 3 times, the first time it would hit you, you would break your barrier, and the second time it would probably kill you. But with Resurrect, it will kill you, and then it will go on to the next guy. And after it goes on to the next guy, you'll come back to life. So there are some benefits to using a Resurrect over a barrier, but you kind of have to make the determination which would be better for your given circumstances. There's another way. We were talking about guard and barrier a while ago, or guard specifically. There's another way to get guard. Well, there's another guard skill I forgot to mention. Aegis and Scotum. Aegis, so it's an active skill. It applies guard effect to all friendly monsters, excluding itself, until the next turn. So this gives you 1 turn of guard. All right. It's a fairly high proc rate at level 10. It's like 50% or something like that. And it will give you guard. Now, it's not going to protect himself, But realize you can put Imitation Smile on him, alright, and then he'll get guard too. So this can be a cheap version of Gale Armor. But it would be better if you're going to go that route to use Scotum. Just got to find a monster with it. So I can show you. So this is Scotum. Applies guard effect to all friendly monsters, excluding itself in range until your next turn. Skill range 1. So here's the difference between, now this is level 7 and it's 54%. I think at level 10 it becomes like 70% or something. So this has a higher proc rate than Aegis, but the difference is the skill range. This has a skill range of 1, whereas Aegis has a skill range of 2. What that means is you can put an Aegis unit in the leader position or the front position, and if you, let's say you put him in the front position, he'll protect the rear, the Aegis will protect the rear and the leader, right? Or you can put the Aegis monster in the leader position, and Aegis will protect the front and the rear. Scotum, on the other hand, only has a range of 1. So if you put him in the front position, he can only protect the rear. And if you put him in the leader position, he can only protect the rear. So the ideal use of a Scotum monster is to be in the rear position, because that way he can protect the front and the leader. Let me show you it on paper, basically. It's not hard to understand. Front, leader, rear. I don't know what I'm doing. Leader, rear, front. Alright, Scotum. Aegis. So Scotum has a range of 1. So if you put Scotum on this guy, he can protect somebody here and here. He'll protect both units, alright, or both monsters. But if you put Scotum here, he can only reach the rear. Alright, so Scotum here, he can only reach the rear, he can't reach the leader. You put Scotum here, he can only reach the rear, he can't reach the front. So Scotum needs to be on your rear. Alright, that way he can reach the leader in the front. And then if you put Imitation Smile on him, he'll protect himself too. So Imitation Smile on a Scotum unit will give you full unit protection. Aegis, on the other hand, you can put Aegis on the leader, and that will protect the rear and the front. Alright, and you can put Aegis on the front, and it will protect the leader in the rear. And you can also put Imitation Smile on him, so he'll protect himself. So with Imitation Smile, Scotum at the rear will protect everybody, and with Imitation Smile, Aegis anywhere will protect everybody. So you're saying, well, why wouldn't you just use Aegis to begin with? Well, the difference is Scotum's going to give you a higher proc rate. I think it's maybe like 15 or 20% higher chance to proc. So clearly use Scotum over Aegis if you want to. Back in the day before Imitation Smile, you'd make like a team with like Aegis back here. This guy would have Aegis, this guy would have Scotum, and actually no, I'm sorry, this guy would have Aegis and Scotum, and this guy would just have Scotum or something along those lines. So you'd have like, you'd double up and stuff like that. But now that Imitation Smile's out, you don't even need to do that. You can just use your Imitation Smile, and it will protect the guy that's casting the guard to begin with. So this is an alternative to using, I should have told you it earlier, it's an alternative to using Gale Armor, because it's dirt cheap to do. You can do it early in the season. See what other stuff. You know, we talked a lot about super rare stuff, and I know there's a lot of people. Unfortunately, the higher the rarity of it, usually the higher the cost of it, and that's a downside because there are a lot of people that don't use CP in this game and don't buy cost, and so they're limited to just the base cost with the library. So I don't want to do a disservice to those people, but that's not to say that if you don't buy CP, you can't use higher cost monsters. You just have to mix in some lower cost monsters with them. Here's another skill we haven't talked about yet. Now, Maelstrom. Now this is a, let me go back a second. This skill, the base skill, the Resurrect, the Dreadnought, Evil Gar, the AZI skill, Prosper Sign, Black Hole, the Bahamut skill. This is like a startup curse skill. Oblivion Shift, the Gap skill, Medusa skill, Grand Wall, Volcano, the Breast skill, Crystallize, F Circle. None of those can be learned. Aside from some holiday cards, you can't learn those a normal way. But there are some super rare skills you can learn. You know, you can learn his skill, his skill, his skill, his skill. Sorry, you can learn his skill too. So there are a lot of skills you can learn. You know, I really recommend checking the spreadsheet out to see what the different teachable skills are, because it can be a lot cheaper than, I mean, for example, Valiant Shift right here, you know, leveling up a super rare monster is very expensive. Leveling up the skills on them. You know, leveling up the skills on an uncommon monster is a lot cheaper, and usually the cost of the card's a lot less too. So it would benefit you to, when you make up your teams, to try to use, you know, some uncommon cards if that would fit your build, because it would just be a lot easier to level up. I mean, you're going to need a super rare to level this one up, or an ore plus a super rare. Whereas for an uncommon card, you can just get those dirt cheap at auction. But let's go back and talk about Maelstrom. Remember we had Volcano and Black Hole, which would remove all of the buffs on an enemy, like Guard and Barrier and whatnot, and then apply the attack. This is kind of like the reverse of that. So this increases attack and attacks one time all enemies in range. So you know, your multi-attack skill, and removes buffs and debuffs effects. But the difference with this skill is, you might be like, oh wow, that's like Black Hole, let me just use that, because this is teachable. Maelstrom is teachable. The difference is the removal of the buffs and the debuff effects, the removal of the guards and the defense and stuff like that happens after the attack. All right. So unlike, you know, the Black Hole, which will remove the stuff and then do the attack, all right, this attacks first, then does the removal. So essentially, if somebody has Gale armor on their team, on their, you know, their enemy, or the enemy has Gale armor, in order to remove Gale armor, Maelstrom will essentially have to proc twice. Proc the first time, you know, the first attack will do, you know, 1 damage because everything will be guarded, but the first attack will remove the buffs and debuffs effect. And then if it procs again, then the attack will go straight through because guard will no longer be on the monsters. So realize that that confuses a lot of people. Cataclysm. This used to be a more popular card. Remember the terror field on that dragon? Well, this is similar to that because that applied the confuse effect. This does too. So this is your multi-attack skill. Attacks everybody in range, and at the end of it applies the confuse effect to everybody. I think Cataclysm is no, that's not teachable. Some skills are. Fertility Eye. Again, this is a attack everybody in range. A lot of skills do that. Also increases skill range. The Sabbath is this is a startup curse skill, and at startup it's basically going to apply curse to everybody. A lot of people use this to beat echo units, like 1 monster count units, because like I said, curse is going to apply damage before the enemy attacks. So, you know, right when the enemy is going to attack, the curse is going to take effect. And what's neat is, you know, curse doesn't care about guard, it doesn't care about barrier. It's going to do damage right through that. Let's see here. This skill is now teachable. It's a really cool. This is one of the few skills that's passive and actually does damage. A lot of skills don't do that. A lot of passive skills don't. So this increases passive. It increases attack and once to an enemy. So it attacks once to an enemy at the start of the turn. So right before this guy takes action. So dependent, you know, whenever this happens is dependent on speed. Whenever this guy is about to take action, this can proc, and it's going to increase attack and attack somebody, and also recharge. So it's not a heal, but it's a recharge. recharges his monster count depending on the amount of damage caused. And the proc chance is very high. I mean, this is 42 and it's only level 3. So this would be, a lot of people put heal skills, unfortunately, or use heal skills on monsters without high defense, and that's counterproductive because, like I said before, if you get hit once, you're going to die. It's more beneficial to have a heal skill on somebody with high defense, so you're not going to be taking much damage to begin with. Here's the soul skill. So in that was a recharge, but it's not stealable anyways. This is a multi-hit skill. It hits everybody in range. Range is 5, and at the end, but it's at the end of the turn. So this is, again, it's not immediate. Realize that this used to be this was one of the first super rares ever released. A very very powerful monster. A lot of people that had it would just kind of rule the season, but now it's not as important anymore. There's a lot of other skills that beat it out, but at the end of the attack, it will also increase them or restore the monster count of itself. So it's not necessarily a heal, but it will. It's not going to remove status effects, but it will heal back monster count. The proc rate's not too high either. If you want to get Lava Hands, you want to pierce that guard, you need the Atar. You'll level him. Some people will just use him by himself, and they'll put Grand Slam on him. There's many different cards that will teach Grand Slam, so you could very well just put Grand Slam on him. But he's a spirit, and way back in one of the first videos I talked about the different tiers. You know, the CHK is going to have a 20% damage boost over a spirit monster, and then also 30% over a beast. So you might as well level this to 7 and teach Lava Hands to the CHK, as opposed to leveling a Grand Slam super rare to 7 and teaching Grand Slam to this guy. Because at the end of the day, you know, this super rare's got to be leveled to 7. You know, one of them. So you might as well level this guy. But that's how you teach Lava Hands. I'm skipping over some of these monsters that don't really, you know, like this is Empty Cleave, another attack skill. Attacks everybody in range, also reduces speed. Like I said, there's a lot of skills on super rares that will just attack everybody and then they'll do something else. But, you know, reducing speed, you know, who cares? Not a big deal. Here's the Queen Lizardman. She has this First Lady skill, and it's only teachable by holiday cards, or you can just use her directly. But what this does is it's going to give her another turn. If she's paired with another monster, it will, you know, an ally, not an enemy. If you pair her with an ally, she will take away one of your allies' turns. It just depends. If you pair her with, you know, let's say you put her in rear, and you pair her with a leader in the front, whose turn she takes away is completely random, but she'll take away, as long as First Lady proc, she'll take away somebody's turn, but she'll get a second turn. So you could have Grand Slam and Onslaught on here, alright, and Grand Slam and Onslaught on a range 3 can normally attack a maximum of 12 hits, but with First Lady, that becomes 24 hits. Now the downside to doing that, though, is you don't have Lava Hands anymore, and so you can't pierce guard. But there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with First Lady, so there's other stuff you could put on here that would make her a really good unit. I'll skip some other stuff. You can read the skill descriptions. I mean, a lot of the stuff is not hard to understand. You just got to take some time and figure it out. And, you know, use the arena. You see me using the arena for stuff to do tests. That's a very great learning resource. You can learn a lot about how skills work and what they exactly do, and how, you know, it's very important, these attack skills and whatnot. A lot of them are based on intelligence, but some of them are based on attack, meaning, you know, your attack stat. And so you can determine all this by using the arena, because it costs a lot to respec your monster. So it's better to, in the arena, you can, you know, decrease and increase levels all you want. So it's better to test all that stuff out in the arena before you actually do it in, you know, in the game. Go down the list. So this is your Assault Disturb, your Stun Imbue, your Vigilance Resist. This is the guy that has Mind Progress, and his level 7's Mind Disturb. Imitation Smile. This is Defend Disturb, and that's the base skill. The level 7 would be Defend Progress. This is Frigid Voice. I forget what the level 7 is on those. Quick Disturb. Nope, defend progress. So the level 7 would be defend disturb. This is prism glow. It's essentially provoke. Remember, provoke is the one that like takes all the normal attacks. Well, this is like provoke, and it also applies barrier, but it's active. Quick disturb. Level 7 would be quick shift or quick progress. Your honey trap. This is your mind disturb, and the level 7 would be mind progress. This is your stun reflect, and at level 5 it teaches stun reflect, I believe. Yep. Aggression power. This is essentially an aura for siege damage. So you put on, a lot of people will use this guy, put on speed spirit and pair him with an Ethlin, which has form circle, and you can make a fast siege team. I haven't talked about this guy yet. This is, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name, but the base skill is illusion, and this is really neat. It's a passive skill, and it's a very high proc rate. This is level 3, 66%. And also this is an easy way to learn rapid shift and mirage shift. Right off the bat, rapid shift. Level 5, level this to 5, mirage shift. Very simple, cheap, effective way. What this skill does is on turn 2, on turn 5, and on turn 8, a barrier will be thrown up for all of your team. So you get a, most battles don't last at 5 and 8, but this is great because once your mirage shift wears off in turn 1, this will put up a barrier for turn 2. Very handy unit, although its stats are really low. Again, you can kind of judge the growth by the initial stats. So the initial stat is 5, so the speed is going to be a very slow monster. You can learn illusion though. I forget what teaches it, but one of the super rares teaches it at 7. This teaches, well, this has quick progress. This is a rapid shift monster. A lot of people use him as an echo unit because he's low cost. He's a dragon. It's a very useful unit. So is the ice dragon, although this cost is 3. The base skill here is mirage shift, and the level 7 would be rapid shift. The level 7 would be mirage shift here. This guy's going to teach you defense spirit. He's very easy to acquire. Your owlbear is a great unit to start the game with and to take early towers because it has great stat growth and has the demolition power, so you're going to do the siege to the towers right off the bat. A lot of people will a very useful unit in the game is anything with is a monster with rapid shift, mirage shift, and mischief. That will get you, if in doubt on what to build something with rapid shift, mirage shift, and mischief. That will do a myriad of things to you. And the best way best things to put those on is either this guy, because he has rapid shift already, so you put on mirage shift and mischief, or this guy's mirage shift, so you put on rapid shift and mischief. This guy's rapid shift, so you can put on mirage shift and mischief. And there's some other stuff too. These are just a couple cards in one of the packs. All the different packs have different cards. That's essentially it. You guys can look around and see what other skills are. Oh, and I guess I'll talk about it now because I can't imagine making a video about, well, I need to talk about the Glassa in the breast unit. Maybe I'll do that in the next video. Those are 2 game-changing skills, and we'll probably talk about that in the next video, along with making units and how to create different builds. So I hope you like this. This is probably the longest video I've ever made. Hope I didn't bore you to death, but if you enjoy it, please make a comment or leave me a comment. I read them, and maybe you have something you want me to talk about. I mean, I don't mind making another video for something in particular. So give me a thumbs up, use my invite code if you join Android, or leave me a comment about what you want me to talk about next. Thanks, guys.